Welcome back to the SPL powered by Alienware. We are in Season 8, Week 2, Day 3, and hopefully about to start set number 1. It's Finch and Goremizer here with me. And Gore, the SPL has been nothing but surprises, basically, except for the Dragons. I think we all knew they'd be up at the top, but everything else has been hard to predict. What are your kind of takeaways as we're almost done with 2 whole weeks of SMITE?
Man, it is just that it's fun to watch, right? You can tend to forget how fun to watch the SPL is. We do it all the time, and I can guarantee, look, you can send me this clip in, 3 months, 4 days, whenever we happen to be in, the middle of a broadcast, and it's just okay, we've been going for a few months now. Let's see. But it's just so much fun to watch, and I think that's been the fresh reminder. We've also got a whole smattering of gods here at the very beginning, which has been just fantastic to see.
A lot of different stuff getting picked, so let's go ahead and take a look then at where everyone is standing after the first couple of weeks or so of play. The Dragons are up at the very top, with the Leviathans right behind, and then a whole lot of teams with just one win, a couple of losses right between them. And then unlucky for the Titans, they have not been able to win just yet, but sure, they'll be able to bounce back soon. Bolt and Valkyries are the set we're going to look at in a little bit, and take a look at where they are, both 1-1 at this point, so right in the middle of those standings. Right behind that Bolt and Valkyrie set is going to be Leviathans and Kings. Gore, I think that has every reason to be a really, really good set with how well the Kings are playing and how good the Leviathans looked earlier, and they're able to get that win over the Titans and such. That said, we'll have plenty of time to talk about that one later on, but I'm pumped for that one too. A whole lot of good SMITE going to be happening today.
Oh, yeah. There's going to be a lot. I've been talking about it pretty much all day. I've been thinking about it since this morning, but the money match of Netroid versus Yarkor, the one who was kicked versus the one who took his place, I don't care anything. Nothing else about that set matters to me. Someone's got to solo somebody in that duo lane, and I am living for it. Whoever wins, there's going to be some sort of talk on Twitter afterward. Something has to happen. And so that's pretty much the only bar I have set for today, is to be able to see that a little bit later.
Well, let's come on back up to this Valks into the Bolts set here. And we'll talk about these Valkyries guys a little bit as well, because they surprised me playing under some tough circumstances, not all here and playing on that sort of localized ping, but still looking really, really good. And it's hard for me when I talk about this Valkyries team not to start with Johnny, who's looking like one of maybe the breakout player of the year here this time, right? I think we all knew he had a chance to come in to be really, really good, but already playing at that high level we expect, especially on Loki, which is a bit of a surprise. Yeah. What's been your takeaway on how he's played so far?
Is that Johnny's still good, right? We were worried, coming into this, he played a lot of Kali, he played a lot of Bakasura, he played a lot of not really meta picks, and those gods that are theoretically only supposed to be good, 20, 25 minutes into the game and onward. And for Belt Slap, sometimes that worked out really well for him. Sometimes he just popped off and it didn't matter that he was Kali. 12 minutes in, he's down in your tier 2 on your left lane, and you have nothing else to do about it and nothing to stop him. But we were kind of worried, how well does that god pool translate? And the answer was, it doesn't, at least not yet. He hasn't played any of those gods. He started pulling out some of these others. The thing I'm really interested in is the fact that when he has been able to perform well in the jungle, that is what sets the Valkyries so far ahead, right? The Bolts, they lost to the Leviathans. The Leviathans are really, really good in their team fight stage, whereas they beat the Scarabs. The Valkyries lost to the Scarabs, but then went and beat the Warriors, right? It's this really weird shuffle, mental gymnastics if you want to figure out the math of who's supposed to be able to beat who right now. But at the end of the day, the thing I can realize is that if it turns into, I want to say, maybe just a Johnny show, it's not necessarily going to be the worst thing for the Valkyries, but if they have a really good team fight later, if Johnny's able to, in this case, beat out Lasbra pretty heavily in the jungle, then it's going to be a pretty easy match for the Valkyries. But if Lasbra, Venenu cause a little bit of trouble for anybody in the jungle, but specifically Johnny, especially in picks and bans, stripping away things like the Loki to make him go a little further into that pocket, then I think they're going to have a much closer chance as the Bolts to deal with this team. Otherwise, yeah, keep your eyes on the rookie, keep your eyes on the rest of this team. They've been popping off.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for him here, right? I mean, Zero's been playing, I think, a bit like turning back the clock. I didn't know he was going to come in and look just as good as he did, 2 years ago when he was regularly playing in the SBL. Raffer has kind of stepped up for this team as well. Yeah, this Valkyrie squad, really a scary one. And it's the job of the Bolts today to try and find a way to deal with it. But you already talked a little bit about what Lasbra's going to have to do up against Johnny. But I also think there's going to be a lot of pressure here on Jake to make sure he can match this Raffer value that's been brought out here recently. He's going to need to be that leader, that pace setter here for this team if they're going to stop the Valkyries from eventually running away with this game.
Now, this is going to feel controversial to say, but I think based on last year's play, high-end Jake, like the top level we saw Jake play at, actually is better to me than high-end Raffer from what we saw last year, right? High-end Raffer, where he's a double world champion, that's going to be hard to beat for anybody. But at least from last year's play, I feel like Jake at his top was able to show up and have really good performances. I mean, game-winning performances, whereas Raffer is so hit or miss sometimes. I mean, we'll watch this guy, and he'll make plays for his team, but at the cost of his life 8 times or something like that. And very similar to what we saw out of Aurora yesterday. We all know Aurora is a phenomenal player, but yesterday was 0-9 or something on that bracket, right? So you're going to have some really hot and cold games from Raffer. You're going to have slightly less variance, I feel, personally, in Jake, but like you said, keeping up with Raffer, especially in a team where there's got to be a lot of synergy, especially with the jungle right now, you've got that teamwork and that team building from last year that the Bolts can fall back on. But if Jake has even a slightly off day or is just askew of wherever Raffer's going to be, that's where I think things could fall apart.
We certainly went in on the importance here of what Jake's going to be able to do for this team. We also talked to Jake about what he's going to be able to do for this team. Gore, it was you who talked to Jake. So let's go ahead and go to that interview and see what his thoughts were coming into the set.
So that's right, we're here with awesome Jake 408, the support player for the Olympus Bolts. You were a rookie last year. Coming into this year, things are well, just fresh for you. You got to stick with the team, even though, as we've covered in some videos that I still think have yet to come out, there were some shuffles. I just want to know, how's the team feeling at the beginning of Season 8 versus Season 7? Like, what's the team dynamic that you're feeling?
Last year we were kind of new, we just formed, but this year we decided to stick together. So, it's great to build upon, all we built upon last year, and I'm excited to keep playing with the boys and see how far we can get this year.
Well, so you guys went 1-1 last week, right? And you had a really pretty dominating performance up against the Scarabs. The Valkyries just got their first win, so they're now 1-1 tied up. But looking at them and kind of sizing them up as an opponent, they seem to be a lot more deadly than at least I was thinking they were going to have credit for. What kind of things are you worried when dealing with a team like them?
The only thing I'm really worried about is, Johnny, auto-attacking us and killing us all. But they're on high ping, so losing to them would feel pretty bad.
Who do you think is like in control over there, right? I was going to give some credit to not only Johnny, but like Ducky over there, so Haddix maybe has his hands full. But do you consider like Johnny your handful or like Lasbra's handful? Who has to deal with him the most to make sure he's shut down?
I'm going to be winning my lane, so I just hope Lasbra can win his lane, okay?
Well, awesome, man. It sounds like you guys have this one pretty much figured out. If you can shut down Johnny, it feels like that's going to be your way into shutting down the Valkyries. Hopefully we can get to see a little bit of that. Good luck in your games. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Well, always great to hear from Jake and what that Bolts team's thinking about. Sounds like they do have some focus there on making sure they can limit Johnny. So, wouldn't be surprised if Johnny ends up being that focal point of them in the picks and bans. So we'll be able to hop into those here in just a second. In fact, right about now, and I believe it is the Bolts, indeed, they're in that first pick spot here. So they'll have a real chance, exactly as Jake was kind of limiting or talking about their core, and trying to limit here what Johnny can do. The thing is, I don't want to make it sound like just banning away Loki from Johnny is enough to box this man in. His Nemesis has looked pretty good too. You still are going to have a lot to worry about, even taking the Loki out of his hands.
What I'm really interested to watch is actually, as you say that, right down there, bottom right of the screen, the bans against the Valkyries, right? And how that escalates with Loki being up there, Nemesis being up there. The Athena makes sense, both of these teams having, like, Athena being very prominent right now. It makes sense for her to just exist. But specifically, how high up those junglers are. I mean, I see Susanoo and Set hovering down at 60 and 40%. It is almost all Johnny picks that are banned away. And so I'm wondering what the Bolts are going to do. They take out this Loki, but are you going to go as heavy-handed onto this and try to go as deep as some of these other teams are, especially when it maybe doesn't necessarily risk hurting Lasbra? I mean, Lasbra loves his Ratatoskr. He loves playing things like Pele. Last year, he was almost known for kind of skirting by what was the meta gods in the jungle and picking the things that just felt good to him.
Some specific bans coming out for the Bulls. They don't want to have to deal with Wukong or Loki. On the Valk side, though, Athena and Guan Yu pretty basic. So now with this Sobek ban here, Yamoja and Tiamat can't both be banned. And I think we all know this Valk's team pretty confident letting that Tiamat through. So perhaps that'll be the case here. Again, maybe they will just go ahead and go with that more traditional ban. But no, it's the Tiamat taken away. So Set still very much available and rather strong in solo or jungle. Wouldn't be surprised if that's prioritized. One of those global hunters. Some good options out there, Gore.
I'm wondering where the Valk's priorities for this Tiamat are, right? Like, willing to pick it up and willing to ban it, but only when it's necessary, willing to let it through in certain scenarios. I'm wondering if this is maybe a little bit of respect being thrown towards Venenu, right? Like, just making sure that he knows, hey man, like we think you could do a little more work with this, or maybe they're not planning on the draft that is going to deal with this Tiamat as well, right? Because what they've been dealing with and doing with it lately has made things, I want to say at least a few days ago, look pretty easy against it. And so maybe they have a different style of draft in their mind. This Yanis definitely not something I personally expected to see on their side just yet. So being able to go into it saying Tiamat's going to mess with what we're planning on drafting, and so maybe they're the only team right now that is really playing around with her.
I do like it, though, Gore. It feels as though they're saying, listen, we're not going to pick Tiamat. We know Giannis is open, and we are giving that to Zeros instantly without hesitation or a second thought. He made all those highlight plays with it to put in his hand, and with that sort of calculus, right, where we're not going to take it if it's left open, maybe they decide to go ahead and take away the ban. In fact, they don't really prioritize, even in the Jingwei picks, I think we're all the way up at the tippity top of value, but we have seen that Imelito has been under tremendous pressure in duo. He's not going to get a whole lot of help over there on that side of the map either, so if that's the case, get him Jingwei, someone that's very safe and can function on her own and farms up for a really crit center late game as well. I think even though it's maybe not what everyone else is doing, the top picks make perfect sense for the Valks.
And this is going to be really solid. Chernobog picked up there for Barracuda. Lala is blocking my vision now. King Arthur coming in as well. I actually am really excited. It's not something we've been talking about much, but like the Haddix versus Ducky lane is going to be, Lala, come on, it's going to be the best thing that you can have in this one. I think it's going to be a really fun solo matchup, and not something you get to typically see too often. And so I'm really, really pumped to see what these two are going to be able to do against each other, how Haddix is performing, especially with Ducky doing as well as he has been lately. That's going to be a really big point of contention, I think, throughout this game.
Yeah, and I wonder if we just saw both solo lane picks get locked in. Almost a certainty with King Arthur going to be over to Haddix, but this set, still a flex pick. This could go into Johnny's hands and be very deadly, or even go into Ducky's hands and be equally deadly. Just going to take a little longer, I think, and start getting involved in those fights. There's a bit of flex there for him, and the Bolt's not going to get concerned with that flexibility. They already have their Amir locked in, so they say, hey, we're taking a bit of a shot towards that support pool now. You're not going to be able to get anything that is premium in that role with Athena already banned, with Sobek already banned, and now the Kepri as well. We've seen Xing Chen kind of rise up a little bit. I wonder if he might be where the Valks are considering going next. Oh, well, they can't.
There
Xing
you
Chen
go.
now banned, so things get even a little bit harder for the Valks.
Yeah, that's been an interesting one. Like, Xing Chen still hasn't registered, I guess, fully in my mind as, like, the next support to be going to. I mean, Yamoja is still available, right? Like, it's one of those things where, like, she has fallen off so heavily that she's even being considered, or I guess being not considered here. Fafnir, again, if I was going to make a money bet on who was going to pick this first this year, I probably would have put it on Jake because he liked picking it up a few times last year. I think we saw PBM do it, but Valkyries, Raph are going to be able to scoop it up, also was very prominent. I mean, this is an interesting draft from the Valkyries. Fafnir's maybe the only one that feels slightly off about it, but when I look at what he can do to augment Yanis and Set and Jingwei, he feels pretty good in those late game team fights.
Gives him some great potential to burn through objectives quickly, even if Giannis isn't necessarily the best confirmation. Though if he's willing to commit through space and time, has a decent shot. But take a look at how this draft is now rounded out for the Bolts. A mere freeze, or maybe a good wall into this Kukulkan ultimate. I mean, that is going to look pretty good over there for the Bolts, and gives them any sort of a mage, allows them to move around the map a bit more freely. Super easy clear in mid, and then opens up the door for him a bit to kind of rotate that around a little bit, not to worry as Tsukiyomi comes in. Gore, I don't know if I want to ask you, because I don't think this provides a ton of clarity over what's going jungle solo here, but anyone maybe you'd rather see in a particular spot?
Man, that's really loaded because both of these have performed very admirably in the jungle and in solo. I think Set solo, at least from what we've seen out of like Fine OK, it looks cleaner to me than Tsukuyomi over there, but then again, I just saw what Nika did with this pick, so I can imagine that Tsukuyomi would also feel solid. Giving either to Johnny is going to be great for you. I think no matter what, you're not necessarily going to get maybe the first initial few levels. Like, both of them feel strong, that 5 level or level 5, level 6 area, so maybe taking a little bit to get online. I don't know that I'm going to complain about Ducky taking either of these. I don't know that I'm going to complain about Johnny taking either of these. And that is the misfortune the Bolts have to deal with. Of course, when they get to load in, they immediately see who's going to deal with who. But knowing that they're going to be going up against a King Arthur, ooh, maybe I lean a little more towards Set there, but I honestly, like, first off, my experience beating King Arthur personally is not very high, but also dealing and playing assassins in that solo lane is something that, at least at the top level, we've seen dabbled in, and maybe getting a little more heavy-handed. It was kind of originally fine okay, then we got to see Nika and some of these others start picking it up, and this is just such a good shuffle because of the fact that they can really dance around it. I think the mobility, at least the ability to chase down from Tsukuyomi, is going to be a little stronger to me to chase down someone like Kukul Khan, but again, they're both so adept at finding kills here. I think you can just flip a coin and decide.
Yeah, I think that you do bring up an interesting question. Will the Valks be deciding on what gives them a better matchup over into the King Arthur in solo? Or maybe trying to help out this identity right now? They might be a little bit slow as a team to really start getting going. Maybe you want to give this guy a little bit of time. But if you put Tsukuyomi in the jungle, maybe that speeds things up. So, kind of as you've already said, a question of what the priorities are for the Valks in terms of getting online sooner. Meanwhile, the Bolts, though, with a Damir and a Kukulkan and Nemesis, they don't need all that much time really at all to get this ball rolling. So, wouldn't be surprised that they're rotating in the mid, looking to cause some problem for the Valks right at the gate. And then they still have some great options when they make it to the late game, too.
Yeah, you want to talk about late game lockdown and guaranteed ults for Kukul Khan. King Arthur and Ymir are going to be able to lock people down very easily, very readily. If your beads are not available on the side of the Valkyries, Yanis, Jingwei, said Tsukuyomi, like, they're going to be getting one shot or at least wombo comboed by the Bolts here. So they really want to get online and try to shut down Venenu, I would argue right now, more than anybody else. As weird as it is, I feel like Bara, especially because he's a big threat, Chernobog you have to pay respect to, but it kind of feels like Vin is going to be the sleeper, not even sleeper. He's going to be very loud, screamingly with that wind abilities.
Well, we'll see. Olympus Bolts and Valkyries, a critical game number 1. Let's get down to the action.
This is a big one, and what a way to start off this Sunday in SMITE action. My name's Dolson. Mifflin's with me. Doug working the camera for game number 1 between the Bolts and the Valkyries. And it ends up being Tsukuyomi in the solo, Miff, followed by Set in the jungle for Johnny, up against Haddix and Lasbra there on the King Arthur and the Nemesis, respectively. So, all of kind of the different options, the ways that the Valkyries could play at the desk sort of went over. What do you think the mindset is given Ducky the Tsukuyomi?
I think it's mainly because Set in the King Arthur matchup kind of has a whoever ults first loses type scenario. If Set goes into his own ultimate, has that channel state where he's a little bit stronger, King Arthur can take him up into the air and hit him with the Cloud Omni Slash for a couple of seconds, just kind of burning away that time. Whereas Tsukuyomi doesn't have that exact same issue, I'd say. Doesn't really need to wait on his own ultimate and can use it as that kill confirmation. So Tsukuyomi should get the better end of that matchup that Set wouldn't have. But outside of that, you just got to take into account that Johnny really does prefer to play these auto-attack-centric characters, and Set fits that bill pretty perfectly.
Johnny, fresh off a fantastic set earlier this weekend, quadra kill in that game. I think it ended up being a delayed penta on the Loki there for the jungler on the Valhalla Valkyries. They're giving him a pick that can perform just as well at the highest echelon if given the opportunities to do so. So let's see. In this one, if we see continued growth out of Valkyrie's jungler, Barracuda and Jake are going to combine for a little bit of damage onto Raffer here. But on the flip side of that coin, Miff, I think it needs to be a good game from Lasbra as well. We've seen Johnny really come out swinging early on here in Season 8 in this Bolts team. You know, more of the same kind of from Season 7, so I think Lasbra needs to show us some growth here in this one, try to keep up with Johnny there on the set.
But he doesn't have a god that can really keep up with Set's pressure throughout the early. I think Lazar might have relegated himself inside of this Nemesis pick to maybe that 10 or so tell then going to be likely filling up presently inside the jungle lane, just waiting to get some items under his belt so he can get involved. It's what I was going to say. Get in though, finds Johnny trying to invade his camps. That's Blink for really nothing. Good little trade from Johnny, who's all strip away something.
Well, that's a perfect example, a point manifest there, Bitcoin. Already, like, he's made some of the camp on both sides of the map. So that's something we're going to have to keep our eyes on as this game goes on. Already dual lane pressure for Awesome Jake and Barracuda here, not surprising. Emir going in to this Fafnir Jingwei lane. Tend to get a lot of early pressure with the freeze and the damage that Jake is able to put out. What do we think of Jake on this Ymir pick? We've seen success, I think, from him in Season 7, a little bit in Season 8 as well, and some good setup for Venenu as well. Jake's got a big role to play.
He certainly does, and he's playing it now. Double freeze, double glacial strike, forcing him backwards, making use of that frostbite passive. Absolutely swinging for the fences. Jake creates infinite space so Barracuda can strip away that purple buff. And you're right, Dave. I think that Jake is going to be so comfortable with the Frost Giant. It's a pick that I really do associate with him as Ducky getting a little bit frisky onto Haddix inside the Soul lane. Johnny looking for an invade of his own on the right side.
Yet again, Johnny finds an opening to put pressure on the Olympus Bolt side of the map, and Johnny does confirm the blue buff invade, so we'll see if Ducky ends up moving over and picking that one up, or it's just denying the buff to Haddix, is really the mindset here. Lasbro, luckily, will have the rest of his back camps available for himself, and Ducky will go pick up the blue buff that had been dropped down once he cleared off that wave. I've loved seeing how the team, this is kind of a composition as well. If we're going to go back to the Ymir, the Kukulkan over there in the mid lane, this is a composition that is kind of akin to how the Kings like to play, isn't it? We've seen this Kings team off to a roaring start after we figured they might need a little bit of time to work up to things. They're playing against the Leviathans this afternoon. That'll be a great one. But sort of this pairing of the Kukulkan with the Ymir is sort of this 1-2 punch that's worked for other teams in the league. So I like the mindset, I think, of the Bolts here. Let's give ourselves the ability to set up fights in this jungle and give Venenu an ultimate that can weave through these team fights and make a big difference. Maybe easier than some other ones.
And not even just the Ymir combo with Kukulkan. Haddix's ultimate's going to set up for it pretty well.
Yep.
If Barracuda is able to find a root, that should be able to help out as well. Just keep your eyes on Ven. He's going to be power farming, especially considering the build that he's going for as well. It seems like the whole entirety of the Olympus Bolts are kind of waiting for that mid-game phase. Book of Thoth is going to be the first pickup for Ven, an age-old classic Kukulkan item. That additional mana is going to work well with the passive. Jake, though, may have stepped too far forward. Here's Johnny.
He's already used his freeze. The wall goes up, and it's just buying some time now. Zero sends it through space and time on in, but it's not the one that confirms the kill. Instead, it's Johnny walking on over into the duo lane. Grabs the kill onto Jake, and the purple buff had just respawned, so you wonder if Jake was maybe trying to step forward, see if the Valkyries were going back for their own purple buff, and it was just bad timing for Jake. Great timing for Johnny to rotate over, realizing there'd be pressure on that purple buff. Lasbro drops his ultimate down onto Ducky here, so it's going to be a return invade for the Bolts, and that's good. That's what you need to see from Lasbro. It's putting pressure elsewhere when you know Johnny's on one side of the map.
Attempted pressure. Unfortunately, Lasbro not quite able to strip away that blue buff on his own. Ducky does pick it up, and then he doesn't have to split his farm with his own jungler. Haddix, who's already been forced out a couple of times in lane, is now going to be suffering from about a 1-level deficit, maybe half a level deficit over there, level 6 to Ducky's 7. And Rapper doing his best Jake impression, stepping up to the purple buff here, seeing if maybe he can find something. Fafnir, not the best god at stripping away buffs like that. All you have to do is stand between him and the hammer, like Jake does there, and you get rid of all that steal potential. Rapper, though, just trying his best to be annoying over here, creating some time and space, maybe zoning him off a couple minions in lane.
Yeah, I'm remembering a particularly tilted aggro last year after a Fafnir hammer stole away one of the Furies in some random set. Oh my goodness, Emilito eats so much damage there from Awesome Jake and Barracuda, so Jake falls for first blood, but that's not going to slow down the Ymir play. Remember, this guy, he loves this style of gameplay, right? Whether it's the Ymir, whether it's the tier, whatever it may be, he can fall down a couple of times in the early game, and he'll still run it at you. And Emilito learns that the hard way. Luckily, Jingwei, safe enough that she can back away, has the Devourer's Gauntlet to sustain up here in this lane just a little bit extra. You have to go back to face, you have the passive to get you here quickly. It's kind of all or nothing, it feels like sometimes when you're engaging on the Jingwei.
Agreed. So hard to make her miss out on minions inside that lane. But these pros, man, with ice in their veins, Emilito dropped to about a quarter HP off of that CC chain from the bolts, but holds on to his beads anyway, knows that he's able to survive that engagement. Very interesting to see. I really do like that the Valhalla Valkyries are allowing Emilito, despite being maybe potentially a little bit rusty considering he hasn't been playing competitively in a while, to still act as that solo agent in lane. Even Rapper going for that benevolence pickup, giving him additional farm, whereas Jake picks up Sentinel's gift, trying to find that pressure, all so that Emilito is being facilitated throughout this match. It's a lot of trust that the Valkyries have in each other.
Yep. Well, and I'll get it right this time. Lasbra and Haddox do successfully invade the Valkyries blue buff here. So that's the reply from the Bolts, is we know that Johnny wants to put pressure on this side of the map, and we're going to send it on over to the other. It's a Greater Scorpion secured now as well. Next blue buff, next speed buff feeling a little bit better for both Lasbra and Haddox. As King Arthur hasn't had the easiest time with the Tsukiyomi, the extra range and poke ability, while still being able to do assassin-y type things. Seemingly, Myth, it's pretty hard to deal with.
It does, as Ducky uses the Piercing Moonlight to put a little bit more damage into
dead?
him. Doesn't have to finish it
no!
himself. No! Ducky does pick up the kill. Haddox falling down. A couple auto attacks from Johnny is all it takes. Barracuda ults in.
Yeah, but now it's the collapse, and Barracuda will pick up the scraps at the end of it. Bolt's finally on the board here. He had to use that ultimate, though, and look at what Emilito's able to do now. Free push out over in the duo lane. He'll get some good damage on this tier 1 tower. Barracuda goes back to base. He's going to have to rotate over, but he's missed a whole wave here. Myth did get the kill, has the XP lead, maybe a little extra gold, but the wave pressure now pushing against the Bolts as Lasbra out in his own jungle. No mana, has enough for the dash, though, and that's all you need.
How?
And he'll survive.
He just ticks over for enough mana with the MP5. Emilito now isolated, fighting
Steal.
all over the map. Forced to use the airstrike to escape, but is he going to be able to get
Blink,
out of there?
Jake. Wow!
Ugh. Good wall,
Jake on
takes
the
away his
wall.
life.
Oh, it's fantastic, and Emilito thought that he had an advantage there for just a moment. Starting to get a little chaotic here. It's only 4 kills on the board, but it seems like overstays one side or the other that are costing people their lives right now. So what was potentially a good moment there for Emilito, you lose out on the kill, or you give a kill over to Barracuda on one side of the map, but you have the ability to free push in a wave, get some great damage on this tower. Another good wall from Jake there, left over from Raffer. That's something we should look forward to this game as well, the ability for the Fafnir to jump over that wall. I'll pause on my thoughts, see if this blue buff invade is successful. Looks like it was, and Haddox wants a little bit more. Ducky is stunned down, and Lasbra will send some damage on through as well. Venatu rotates over for a little bit of a kill steal there, but now the Olympus Bolt's mid laner has a kill in his back pocket as well.
He does. Ven, almost superfluous on that rotation. Johnny could
Jake!
not help as he was zeros in a little bit of trouble. Uses the ultimate CC immunity to avoid the slow and the Spirit of the Nine wins. But Lasbra, hot on his heels, zeros realizes it. Portals all the way back out. No lazy backs from the Valhalla Valkyries mid laner. I'm not enjoying the pace, though. It feels like Emilito is hesitant to use his beads, losing his life with the active still available to him. Ducky tries to solo defend his blue buff with Johnny just kind of hovering in the wings, hoping that he's able to absorb some of that farm. It just feels like they're kind of getting caught on the back foot every now and then inside of these engagements, whereas the Olympus Bolts are always rotating in numbers, and they're rotating ready to fight.
Right. This Bolts team is suddenly starting to play very, very proactive. You know, I guess you literally do call it hitting the walls, right, if you're a Ymir. I mean, you're not technically hitting somebody with the ability, but Jake has just been so on point. The last, like, 3 or 4 walls I've seen this guy throw up have been near perfect and have set up for at least a kill and then potentially a couple on the back end. Then he does it again, the wall! The double freeze from Jake. Will the DOT get zeros? It will not. Johnny's going to be able to walk away as well. That is devastating that doesn't result in a couple of kills, but Jake is playing out of his mind the first 11 minutes of this game. Ymir's going to be a problem.
He really is, man. Jake, that double freeze, so clean, knows exactly where Zeros wants to go because of the portal on the wall. Now, Pyromancer started up. Raffer, the only one in range to defend. Johnny, half health. Here comes the ult from Zeros. What?
Valhalla Valkyries steal it away. Must have been Zeros there, and the Piercing Moonlight connects over onto Lasbra. The Valhalla Valkyries surging back now in game number 1. Barracuda soars on in, over from the duo lane. He'll help Venenu pick up a kill onto Raffer here, but Johnny, he's got a double in the meantime. Zero still up, he's full HP. Addict's trying to spin, find the damage onto Johnny, but he will not. Barracuda will miss out on the root. A well-timed beads from Ducky keeps the Tsukiyomi up and standing. It's a Pyromancer +2 for the Valkyries.
And Emilito, the entire time refusing to leave his lane, picks out that tier 1 tower and starts the push onto the tier 2. Unfortunate situation for Barracuda there. Lands with the ultimate, tries to finish off the kill onto Johnny. And Johnny puts on his tap dancing shoes, presses the A and D key repeatedly, maybe 20 times on his keyboard, and just avoids every single auto into a portal. Able to get him out of that one. The Valhalla Valkyries clean steal on the Pyromancer and clean fight afterward as well.
Effectively our fault, right? We're just talking about how proactive and well the Bolts are playing, and then in that same moment, the Valkyries steal away the Pyro, win a big fight on the back end of it, pull the gold lead, 3,000 or so in their favor. But Jake, he's not happy with it. Another double freeze for this Ymir. The portal has been closed, but Johnny has some escapability to get out of this one as well. That is heartbreaking. That is now another set of kills that this Bolts team probably feels like got away from them. They can rotate over, maybe start to look towards this Gold Fury. But this game looks so different, I feel like, if those kills end up rolling through. I'm not sure if Venenu didn't have the ultimate there in that moment. Might need it here to secure down the Gold Fury. Spirit of the Nine wins, secured by the Olympus Bolts, and they'll get out alive.
That was a risky ultimate from Ben. A little bit slow there. Maybe had Rapper jumped, he may have been able to take it away. It was already down to less than 200 HP once the Gold Fury goes down. But still, clean play from the Bolts off of forcing 2 members of the Valkyries back to base and also stripping away Zero's Aegis. He would have died to the Tornado off that double freeze had he not used it. So the Olympus Bolts certainly playing around the 408 incredibly well right now. But that's really does feel like that's where all the aggression is being generated, doesn't it, Dave? It's just Jake looking for these proactive plays. Good strategy, but they may need to diversify their approach to these team fights pretty soon. The Valkyries could just stop looking for these fights. They could just play safe and not give Jake these opportunities.
You almost said portfolio there, Miff. What can you tell me about diversifying my portfolio in the current economy?
You want to invest in Doge, straight to the moon. GME's doing really good. Yeah, all that stuff.
I don't know, man. I'm down on GameStop a little bit here, but we're not gonna talk about that because I'm gonna get sad. We'll see if Jake can set up another wall. Attempts to, but Rapper will leap away. So Rapper survives. Pyromancer still on its way back. So no objectives outside of the FG to look at here. Greater Scorpion looked at by Jake and Venenu. Just waiting is Jake. You can tell he's got the eye for it. Anyone steps too far forward in this Ymir is going to try to set up a fight. You can see where Venenu's mind was with his build. Went Book of Thoth first overall, got that one nice and stacked up, and then went back Mifflin, got the cooldown boots and the Sands of Time. So Venenu's going to be able to weave a few extra abilities in there on top of some extra power there from that Book of Thoth on the triple con.
Yeah, he's kind of leveraging that Book of Thoth to allow him not to have to go into that Rod of Zahudi too earlier, that Spear of Desolation, those raw stat items that give you triple digits in the power department. Instead, he can go for that Divine Ruin. A little bit less power than otherwise, but still getting that passive should be incredibly useful up against the healing from Raffer onto himself, or even the lifesteal from Emilito. So I really do like how he's gone to go ahead and build this Kukulkan, but he's going to have to get involved a little bit more so. So far, these Spirit of the Nine Winds have only really been used to confirm objectives. Emilito, what are you doing in there so deep, bud?
Emilito has his ultimate, but the portal's there. It's a big freeze from Jake. On the back end of the portals, Johnny gets knocked aside by the Spirit of the Nine Winds, and Barracuda on a killing spree 15 minutes in. Raffer doing his best to leap away, and he'll do so on over to Zeros, who portals away back into the Gold Fury. Bit out of the wall is great from Jake. Catches out the dash from Emilito, and that's one dead Jingwei. Good for one double kill for Barracuda.
That's all off the back of Jake just setting up inside of that portal, realizing that's exactly where Emil wanted to go. The Ymir player over here is doing it all for his team, stepping up for the squad. The Olympus Bolts now only about 900 gold down. We're closer to 2,000 before that team fight. 6-4 reads the slash lines across the top of the screen 16 minutes into the game. And with Gold Fury spawning very soon, I feel like the Bolts are going to have all the advantage going into that team fight.
Barracuda's feeling good. Top net worth in the game. 800 or so is still the gold lead for the Valhalla Valkyries. 7 or 800 or so is the XP lead for the Olympus Bolts. You don't often see that. It is the way we are, though. Johnny has been able to power farm through this game. 3 kills under his belt. That's where most of the gold difference is. You have to imagine 2 levels over Lasbra is the Valhalla Valkyries jungler. So a lot lies on the shoulders of this set now. As Awesome Jake walks forward, chunks down some damage onto Johnny, who will retreat back to his side of the jungle, farm up, and in the meantime, the Bolts get themselves a pyro.
They do, still trying to close up that gold lead, halved it again to 500, just trying to get ready for this gold free, and I like what they do. They desync the neutral objectives. Pyromancer now going to be down once that gold free spawns. The Valhalla Valkyries are either going to have to put up a defense around the gold free itself instead of going for that trade onto the Pyromancer. They're essentially, the Bolts that is, forcing a fight around a POI. I really do like this style, especially considering how aggressive they've been playing the entirety of this match.
Zero's going for a little bit of the burst build that we've seen Hurrywind like as well. Chronos Pendant into the Soul Gem later on. Maybe a Staff of Mirrodin. Ducky now maybe being ganked by Lasbra. Lasbra has his ultimate ready. Drops it down onto the Tsukiyomi. Piercing Moonlight catches out, but it just swaps his spot with Haddix. Then a relatively easy kill now for the Olympus Bolts. One issue for the Tsukiyomi. Doesn't have that great of escapability once the gank arrives.
But he is at least, with his last breath, able to take away Lasbra's beads there. Maybe a little bit greedy from Lasbra. Doesn't really need to drop the beads considering how out of position Ducky was. So maybe Lasbra has to play a little bit safer going forward. Jake won't give him that opportunity, though. Immediately starts to search his way forward. Says, I don't care about your relic. We're looking for fights now. Gold Fury, Oni Fury rather, already respawned. Ducky dead for 15 seconds. Bolts looking to take it.
There's just something so humorous about that interaction. Jake shows up, and then immediately everyone portals away from the mid lane because they don't want to deal with this Ymir. Bolts lock in the Oni Fury for themselves. The through space in time was attempted there by Zeros, but just a little bit too late. Didn't accurately calculate to pinpoint accuracy the DPS that the Bolts had on that objective just yet. Now it's a mid lane, tier 1 tower being looked at. Rapper leaps over the wall by Awesome Jake. No through space in time. No ultimate on the Nemesis either. Jake down to half HP, just above it. Raffer the same for him as well. And the Valhalla Valkyries putting up a defense around this tier 1 tower. And they weren't able to show much face around the Fury.
Yeah, Barracuda elects to go back over to the left-hand side of the map, seeing if maybe he can split up this pressure a little bit. Does pull over the majority of the Valkyries into the jungle, which exposes that tier 1 mid tower yet again. Should fall down there, as well as the tier 1 on left. The Valhalla Valkyries get their ankles broken on the map, distracted by Barracuda, losing out on all their objectives.
That was pretty perfect timing from the Oni waves as well for the Bolts. They get the mid lane tier 1 tower, left side tier 1 tower. Last Oni minion over on the right-hand side. Barracuda's used his ultimate. He'll crash down back behind Raffer, do a little damage to the tower on his way out. Opting for the crit build on this Chernobog that we've seen so popular. You kind of have the wealth of riches, and you know, this is really when you'll see the ideal build path that these hunters like to go for, these ADCs here. Not that it hasn't been kind of obvious to us for the last couple of days, but when Barracuda's 401, top net worth in the game, still opting for Devos. Wind Demon a little bit earlier than the Executioner. That's something Barracudas like to do. Same for Emilito, though, on the other side. It's the same build path for both hunters. Haddix, half HP. Pyromancer not here. Not a fight over all that much here on the right-hand side.
No, just vying for position right now are the Valkyries. If they're able to continue finding poke on preferably targets that aren't Haddix, as he does have Stone of Gaia, they should be able to create some space and get something back in return. The Bolts just hovering inside the jungle, not quite there to put up a defense on the tier 1 tower. Valhalla Valkyries able to strip that one away absolutely for free. And again, resume that positioning around the Fire Giant, daring the Bolts to step forward, but not willing to step forward themselves. Both teams now returning back to neutral, and the gold deficit has switched sides. Now, the Bolts benefiting from about a 800, nearly 1,000 gold lead experience, starting to equalize itself as well. Really, the largest gap could be inside of that jungle role. Johnny has been level 18 for a moment now. Lasbra just now ticking over to 17. It's going to be an incredibly even team fight once they do decide to group up around one of these POIs. Could be this Gold Fury once it respawns. More than likely could be the Fire Giant as we are approaching that phase of the game. But both teams very ready to take the engagement. Only one active down in the match, and it's Haddix with that beads.
That's right, Sunder for Raffer on the other side. So whether it's Jake or Haddix that walks maybe too far forward, His health bars might melt down. That is kind of the duality of this Ymir, isn't it? I mean, 2 deaths on Jake is half of the total kills that the Valkyries have. Not all that much. Certainly not scoffing or making fun of 2 deaths. It's not very much compared to the value that Jake has brought to this match. But you then have to kind of calculate your engagements now if you're Jake. You've been walking forward kind of free and clear throughout the early part of this game. A Sunder connects onto you after you get your rotation off. If your team isn't immediately there to follow up, you're going to be feeling the pain a little bit. Just as Lasbra is now. There's some of that burst damage from the mid lane there from Zeros through space and time. Again, just a little bit late, but Barracuda gets clipped by the back end of that ability. Zeros portals back to the rest of his team. Jake peeling off the back line with a good wall. Ducky, he's found Barracuda. Now the 4-0 Chernabog out of the fight. Johnny searching for more blood as Venenu works away from the rest of the fight. Lasbra will peel him out and get the return kill onto Ducky. 4 grouped up members of the Valkyrie get walled off by Jake. And the DOT from Venenu doing well and separating out the remainder of this fight.
Raffer still trying to find the chase. If he can get a stun, should be able to set up the kill for his team. Not quite on the mark with the jump, but Jake left high and dry. Throws up the wall. Maxed out at this point, 7 seconds. It's going to be there. Buys time for Haddix to work his way back in.
Haddix half HP, but he's got 3 members of the Valkyries looking at him. You got to leave this fight, my friend, unless Venenu can supply the rest of the damage. The bolt's on the wrong side of the map as an airstrike up and over from Emilito. And the last bit of damage will roll through onto this Ymir, but as Ymir set up the damage for Haddix, he has a return kill over onto Emilito. Venenu still running from Johnny. Can you turn around, do the damage, sidestep on the DOT, and the Zephyr misses as well. Lasbro's found a kill in mid. Johnny gets one over here on the right. Chaos reigns supreme in the battleground.
Sloppy engagement from both teams there. Initially, Ducky oversteps himself trying to chase out the kill onto Ben, loses his life to the backup from Lazara. From there, it's all Valhalla Valkyries on the chase. Unfortunately, Rapper not quite able to find the CC for his team, trades out his own life, 2-for-2 engagement, but take a peek at the relic usage across the board. Beads maintained on 3 members of the Bolts, whereas the Valkyries have expended just about every single relic, except for the Aegis on a Zeros, who goes down before it was back up and available.
Haddix picks up Spectral Armor as his final item in his build prior to upgrading that Bluestone Pennant into what we would assume will be a Bluestone Brooch. Reinforced Greaves, first set of boots. Sort of the popular build path, minus a Clan Shield plus a Void Shield. Stone of Gaia tends to be what the King Arthur's like here. So you saw how much pressure Haddix was able to absorb as the Bolts will get the Primal Fury relatively for free. Now with the Spectral Armor and the Pestilence, this King Arthur is going to be a real problem.
It will be. This King Arthur has been essentially allowed to do no wrong inside these engagements. It feels like the Valhalla Valkyries are employing the if we don't look at him, if we ignore him, he's not there strategy for Haddix, just hoping that they can burn through the back line of the Bolts before Haddix is able to get to their own back line. But he has been running amok. He hasn't allowed Zeros to really utilize this Yanis. He's been constantly on top of him. And Jake, you've been constantly on top of anyone he can lock eyes with. Rapper getting frozen out here. Not much damage going to come through, but a nice double wall.
Unfortunately, it's just a little flash in the pan, and the Bolts aren't there to capitalize on it just yet. Pyromancer, not here. Fury, not here. Gold Fire Giant, rather, is here. It's another wall connecting from Jake. This is where this Ymir wants to fight. Look, you got all these small, weaving jungle paths. Jake is going to have an easier time getting massive walls, massive engage for his team, but it's Jake now that's being leapt on. Johnny on his own on the right-hand side, spotted out by a ward, and Haddix will force him back. Awesome Jake eats the Sunder, and a lot of damage here. This is what I said you got to be worried about if you're Jake and if you go in alone. Now Haddix has gotten Johnny locked in on the right-hand side, and look at the immediate collapse from the Bolts. It's an Aegis to keep Johnny in the fight a little bit longer, but the health bars melting away from the red side. You could say the same for Blue, though. Venenu up with the rest of his team. Spirit of the Nine wins, splits the upright, and Emilito survives for the time being, but not for long. Lasbra finds his time to strike, and he strikes for 2.
But the whole fight was dictated by Haddix, wasn't it? Doesn't allow Johnny to step forward, takes all of his relics on his own, and slows down the engagement from the Valkyries. We saw Ducky drop that Piercing Moonlight, and the rest of his voice tried to work their way forward, but they were routed by this King Arthur. Didn't allow them to continue moving up, which creates the space for Ven to output his damage, for Lazara to move up and find the double, and now the Olympus Bolts have a huge opportunity moving in towards the Fire Giant with 10 seconds left on Rapper's respawn, 20 seconds left on Emilito's, both in the grayscale screen. No way Valhalla Valkyries can step up to defend.
Zeros has the through space and time, but that's such a low percentage chance, and you might need that on the defense here very shortly. The last Tier 1 tower on the right-hand side of the map and in the game will go down now as the Olympus Bolts knock it clean off the map. And they'll storm as 5 down the right-hand side. Look at the call, though, by Johnny and Zeros. They're going to continue pushing, at least just the wave for the time being. Realize they're going to be needed on this Phoenix defense. And the Boltsmith, they want this right-hand side.
Yeah, better late than never from the mid-jungle combo on the side of Vahalla. Valkyries still only 3 members set up on the defense, but the Bolts realize that both of them had back, so they go ahead and retreat themselves. Might as well strip away what they can safely before they take a risky play around these Phoenixes. 2 Tier 2 towers still standing on the side of the Chaos team. Pyromancer as well. Free gold next XP to put in your pocket, line them up, go back to base, spend up. I imagine we see them go for a 4-1 split. 4 in the left, 1 in mid, to try and strip away these Tier 2s.
It's been a quiet response from the Valkyries. Johnny at 4-1 and 3 on this set. So heavily jumped on and around that Fire Giant fight. It was going to be so difficult for the Valkyries to win at that point. A couple upgraded shells, one for Jake, one for Bera. Definitely clips the wings of this set here just a little bit. Barracuda's completed his build, same with Emilito. So both hunters in a relatively similar spot as far as outputting of damage. It's just about getting the uptime on the backside of the fight. Barracuda, I think, has done wonders in his timing on the engages with that Chernobog ultimate. It's so difficult to calculate sometimes that you have to go to an enemy. But Barracuda ults in onto Johnny there with the rest of his team around the FG. It makes it look good. Not surprising, Myth. No defense put up around this Tier 2 tower by the Valkyries. There's still 2 minutes, 15 seconds left on the Fire Giant power play. Might shift your eyes towards mid, but mid is under the control of Lasbro right now, and you do have your 4-1 split. You got to be careful if you're the Valkyries. You step up too far, Jake's going to give you a freeze, and Ducky learns that the hard way.
Phoenix goes down absolutely for free. Huge new space of time from Zeros. Drops Ben down low. Ducky should be able to finish that one up.
Whoa, the Spirit of the Nine Winds flies through. Venenu does end up going down, and it's Johnny who picks up the kill. The Aegis will time out. Does Lasbro have the legs to get the kill on the back end of the fight? Not yet. And now Haddix is caught in with the Valkyries. It's the best you could hope for if you're on the red side. You saved a couple of kills here, but look, Barracuda full HP. He's got all this uptime. Johnny has to go back to base.
What?
It's a 1-for-1 trade as we stand. Haddix gets some damage over the wall, delays the back, and the Olympus Bolts trying to decide where to go next.
Haddix absolutely crazy for that attempted play. Doesn't amount to much, but spots out Johnny on a ward, blinks forward to find the beam, trying to stop that back just for a moment. Heads up play from the Soul Laner creates a little bit more time. Now the Bolts can move in towards this Tier 2 tower in mid with 0 opposition. Clean play from Zeros does start off that fight well, but the Valhalla Valkyries so far behind at this point, nearly 10,000 gold, that even though they do drop Ben to about 10% HP before the fight even starts off proper, they aren't able to win the engagement cleanly. The Olympus Bolts strip away all towers and the left side Phoenix and the Primal Fury, and they should be able to go back to base and just spend it all up.
That's right, pretty calculated there from the Bolts as well. Let's get this left side Phoenix down in preparation for the next Fire Giant. It'll be an enhanced Fire Giant. Up next, that'll be arriving in the next minute and a half. So 30 seconds left on the Fire Giant buff, but not much more to gather here if you're the Olympus Bolts. All about setting up vision, setting up engage. And you have to imagine if the Valkyries are going to come out and contest this one, Mifflin, it's a lot around if Johnny can stay alive or not. Lasbra engages onto Zeros, who has to leave. Zeros, though, was able to hold on to both Aegis and Beads. Lasbra drops down the ultimate. So not all is lost on either side.
No, Fire Giant spawning in 1 minute as well. The Valkyries, if they are able to, should push up this left lane as far as they can before they regroup and trying to defend this Fire Giant. Easier said than done with an unorthodox mage like Yanis. We might see them attempt what we saw earlier around the Pyromancer, just an attempted snipe steal from Zeros. Jake hovering pretty far forward here. Zeros playing with fire, moving this far up on his own. No one really there to help him out. If he does get spotted, decides better of it and starts to back his way up. But the Olympus Bolts establish perfect vision dominance around the Fire Giant itself, and Jake creating so much space. Just standing on a ward doesn't matter. Clear it out. Let's keep moving forward.
Good to look at actives going into this next fight. Johnny, no Aegis. Blink for Lasbra, ready to go. No Aegis on Venenu. That's the only relic that'll be down for the next 25 seconds for the Bolts. Johnny's will be up in the next 25 seconds as well, and then Ducky and Emilito are getting their beads back. So you're going to have a near full strength fight here as far as relics go. That's the most important thing going up against this Ymir, up against the Fafnir as well. Johnny, you find that opening, you're going to need that Aegis. Ibrahim on the backline. We learned that the hard way, but has Jake been caught out before the FG has even been started? The Ymir is down to half HP, but look at the damage from Venenu! Unreal! Jake survives, he lives on. Haddix peeling out Raffer in the back. Lasbra chases down Ducky. Spirit of the Nine wins yet again. No connection, but Lasbra, has he done enough? Barracuda, what's he want to do here? He'll drop down, he'll get Emilito, but it's Awesome Jake who goes in the meantime, but Johnny falls. Venenu gets that one. 3 down now for the Valkyries. The last 2 got no health on the meters, and Barracuda's trying to chase down the extra. Double kill for the Chernobog, and it looks like the Bolts take game 1.
Barracuda dunks into 3 people on his own, and almost as an afterthought, 3 auto attacks is all it took. Nice RNG with the crit, puts Emilito down 100-0. The Bolts now surging forward into the base of the Vahalla Valkyries. Just Zeros left to defend.
I don't think Zeros has a chance to get this one. Barracuda's just doing way too much damage. 7-1-5 on the Chernobog. We said Jake's name plenty in that game for good reason. There was a lot of setup out of the Ymir. But the capitalization from Haddix, Lasbra, Venenu, Barracuda, this was a team win, you have to feel like, from the Olympus Bolt, and the engage was kind of played perfectly on the other side from the Ymir. Every once in a while, Myth, Jake will hit that stride, and it's just so difficult to play into.
He just looks so good on this pick, man. If you're playing against Jake, I think at this point he should have earned the respect enough so that you're at least banning out this Ymir, trying to strip it away from him somehow, some way. But I think it does come down to support diff, not just because Jake looked so phenomenal in that Ymir, but Raffer was largely absent for the first 16 or so minutes. I think 18 minutes in was the first time we saw him even try and utilize the Dragon form. This Fafnir pick, so hard to execute on the field, even when you don't have elevated ping. I want to see Raffer go to something that's a little bit easier to perform on in Game 2.
Well, look at what happened to Jake there. He got dove on by like 6 guys, if that's even possible. It's not. On the last fight there, nearly died, and it kind of baited in the rest of the fight for the Bolts to win. Even when Jake was doing wrong, it felt like he could do no wrong there in game number 1. Bolts, they take game 1 just over 30 minutes. We'll take a quick break. We'll see you back right after.
It was close for a while there, Gore, but in the end, this game goes to the Bolts. on the back of some really impressive frontline play. Listen, us ADCs are never going to tell you this honestly, so just kind of keep this in your head. Every time we have a 7-1 in 4 slash line, it's because some front line somewhere did their job right, and then we just kind of look really good. Gore, what was your read here on this one? Was it frontline dominance, or what happened here? Maybe a bit of disjointment on the other side from the Valkyries?
I'd say, yeah, a little bit of both, right? Jake just had phenomenal walls, right? Jake looked incredibly good. When Haddock starts rotating into the fights, it looks incredibly good, and the way that they just fused together worked out really well. It had a lot of good peel for Barra, a lot of good peel for Vin, and a lot of good setup. I'm actually going to throw Lasbra's name out there because as someone who I like to give trouble because sometimes he has stellar performances where he's very impactful. I think this game is a good example of that. And sometimes he has performances where we're kind of left wondering where the jungle was for the Bolts. I think this was a really good game for him. And he's been a little more consistent so far in Season 8. Granted, we haven't gotten to see as much of him, so let's see how that continues over the rest of the year. But this looked like a more whole team than what we really are, I would argue, even used to seeing, right? Jake gets to come in feeling confident in his abilities, and of course it sets up, like you had said, for Barra to just knock down anything that stands in his way. Something that Barra was actually missing out on, like going back a couple of years, you know, like after parties and discussions prior to picking up Jake, like when Barra had like the decision of moving on after Jeff Hindla, it was what do you want and what kind of style, and he's like, I want someone who's gonna fight with me. And, like, it was one of those things, like, slowly but surely, you go back a couple of years, Jeff Hindla was getting a little more passive and a little more I want to say, backseat as a support. Jake's in their face, and as far as I can tell, Barra's more than happy with it, affecting 12 kills in this one, only 1 death. I mean, that's exactly what you would want. Johnny did everything in his power to try and carry the kills forward. Ducky and Zeros did all of the damage they could do, but I think Emilito, Raffer, they stacked up quite a few deaths throughout all of that, and it just felt like the Valkyries were a little disjointed and the Bolts were firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, it really felt like the rest of the Valks weren't able to catch up to Johnny in time. Take a look here, though. Make sure you tweet us at hashtag SPL if you want to show up here in our Twitter feed on the SPL. This is from Blind Little Cub, rocking the Bolts gear, and I'm sure feeling pretty good after that Game 1 win for Barra and the boys. Check out Inside Apparel if you want to grab some Bolts gear of your own and look just as good. Gore, I think there were a couple times where maybe it's hard to tell if Johnny was a little too much on his own or the backup wasn't there, but they have this fight near fire where Haddox ults Johnny up the second he gets in the fight, and my man Johnny never gets to do anything in that entire fight. For the rest of it, the Bolts team don't have to worry about the enemy jungler at all. And when you're up in the air like that, either the other team can group around you or your team can get there too, and they just weren't there to have his back, or he was a little too far forward, whichever one.
This is where things get a weird shift, I think, in picks and bans, right? Because where do you go? Do you make the dynamic shift of target bans and try to control what they're locking in, or do you go to the other side, which is, okay, we're going to continue with the same bans and just hope that we can adapt to that style a little bit better? I feel like you have to work in a Ymir ban in there, and maybe that's something that takes the place of the Tiamat. We were kind of talking about it last time for the Valkyries. Like, if you're worried about it, which one is scarier to you? Is it going to be this Tiamat, or is it going to be what we just saw come out of Jake?
That is the question. Let's see what they decide here in picks and bans for game number 2. I believe the Bolts will again be in that first pick spot, and that is indeed the case here. The Valkyries, after the loss, electing to take that second pick position. Let's see if they can grab some value. Remember, this team has been choosing to prioritize for Zeros this Giannis early on, and I believe he was top damage in the lobby in Game 1. I think he had 20,000, which just barely edged out Haddock for that number 1 spot. So if you want to keep giving it to Zeros, it's hard for me to complain with 20,000 damage and dying so few times. So I don't know what your read is. Do you think maybe they can give him the Giannis, but they should wait, or are you happy with where it's been?
Man, it feels like something you gotta scoop up fast. I don't know where it is in terms of priorities for Venenu, right? Like, that's where things really start to trip you up. Everybody else is locking in this Giannis, so if you want that for Zeros, it feels like you almost have to get it. They did pick the Ymir over that last time, though, and so far the bans are the exact same as game number 1. So if you know that the Bolts are going to prioritize Jake specifically a little bit faster, maybe you can take that, not even backseat, but like a more relaxed route, maybe assume or guess that Venenu's not necessarily going to swing a Giannis immediately. That Chernobog looked really good, that King Arthur looked really good, both ban-worthy. Like, I think you have a lot more wiggle room to play with, even if you don't get the Giannis. but also Zeros did the most damage on their team and was very survivable. So, like, you kind of want it. It's just this weird juggle that I think the Valkyries are really going to have to figure out how to tackle.
That'll be a key question. Remember, the Valkyries also made a big decision between that Tsukiyomi and the set, kind of being these flex picks that made it through the bans in Game 1, and then they kind of had the guessing game of where they're going to go. But that will not be the case this time. The Bolts removed the set from the equation and instead elect to grab that Sobek from the very first spot. I'm a bit surprised. Don't see a whole lot of reason to take my man Jake off the Amir with the game he had in game number 1, but sometimes you can get a bit punished. Not one size fits all for that Amir. Sobek might be one size fits all, though. This god is just real good.
Yes. I think this is actually one of those ones that they banned it, right? Set's kind of taking Sobek's place from game 1. But, like you said, even though if you have a great game, the way that Jake just did, Sobek's going to be good for Raffer. I don't want Raffer to get Sobek in this case, right? I want that kind of control. So it is something that Jake is going to be able to play at a very high level and very well executed. And it's also something that you're taking away from Raffer so that he can't do it. It does leave Ymir open for the other side, and that might open things up for them a little bit better, but I'm not sure whether or not they want to prioritize it. The thing that does confuse me, Fincha, and this is something that I think it has to be mentioned because of all of the priority hunters that we have been seeing over Season 8, Jingwei is not number 1. I mean, she is the backup pick for a lot of these people. Yeah, like she is going to be the one that if your understudy has a day where they can't make it, all of a sudden Jingwei for some reason has to sneak in. So the fact that they're top 2ing or 2 games in a row is a little odd to me because you swap Ymir out for this Sobek, and all of a sudden the Bolts are running back the same composition and the same order no matter what that they had in game number 1. And I'm looking at a 1-5 Jingwei, did decent damage, and we've seen Emilito have some good games on her, but is it really worth top 2ing? That's the problem I have with this now.
Yeah, Gord, it's hard to say yes to that when Emilito spent the vast majority of his time running away in Game 1 because he was under constant siege, and even when he was running, he wasn't always successful. He gets caught out early on in the game, never uses speeds, dies anyway. I mean, like you said, 5 deaths in that game on someone like Jingwei doesn't seem like you're really adding up with what one of her core strengths is, which is that safety, right? So we'll see how he plays it. Emilito played a real aggressive play style occasionally in that game. We saw him looping around fights, looking for kind of these assassin-y angles that didn't always line up with what his team was doing. Maybe he'll play this Jingwei a little bit more back behind, or maybe we'll see the exact same thing from him and it just works out this time because they have a little bit more control over the map.
Well, now I'm keeping my eyes if they try to control the jungle. Okay, that one absolutely threw me for a loop. Johnny and Lasbra can both play this Ratatosker pretty well.
Yep.
So I guess it makes sense try and scoop it away. You can assume Ducky, based on the game and performance he had last time, might go back to the Tsukiyomi. But I really like this because if the Bolts lean maybe too heavily into jungle bans here, I mean, with Loki, Ratatosker, and Set all banned away, what if Johnny just is playing the Tsukiyomi and all of a sudden they've, at least for the Ratatosker, have banned something they maybe didn't need to. And so I like the kind of retaliation or the double step back, right? Take a couple of steps and let the Khepri ban away as well. Try to control Raffer a little bit. The Fafnir wasn't really that threatening, so you have a lot of wiggle room over there. But again, Ymir is still open. I wouldn't mind seeing maybe that picked up.
Ganesh is a bit of a Raffer signature pick, though. He loves to play this.
Yeah.
It allows him to kind
Ganesh.
of impact the front line and back line simultaneously, so not a bad pick for him. You heard Miff say kind of at the beginning of Game 1 that he thinks Johnny really likes to prioritize these auto-attack based assassins, and that maybe the Tsukiyomi is a bit more likely to end up over in Ducky's hands. We'll see if that bears true yet a second time, if he ends up going for a more traditional attack-based assassin with their final pick or not. Meanwhile, Lasbra pulling out this Serkept. Gore, this has become something that Lasbra's played here recently, not just recently, but a little bit more recently, and looking pretty good for my money. You like it here?
And I'm excited to see it because not only has it been looking good, but it was even banned away from him last game. Nemesis performed well enough that they kind of swapped one evil, what feels like, for another. I mean, you're running the same draft back, except you're getting Ymir for Sobek traded in and the Serket for Nemesis traded in. Serket was banned out, so you have to think that Lasbra is going to look a little bit better on her than the Nemesis, or at least maybe find a little more synergy, especially, I would argue, more lockdown for the Kukulkan. And Sobek is maybe not an upgrade. I would say a lateral trade for Ymir. Like, he's just more universal, the way that you had kind of worded it earlier. A lot more people can play him. He's very, very solid, whereas Ymir's walls are really good in the jungle. Sobek's plucks are what makes him so good. And while I don't know if it's going to lead to as many crazy first bloods and fights that you could have on the side of the bolts, I think late game you're going to get to see the same Jake style play. So this Ganesh, especially since he's not that good for about 5 levels, is going to have to play the patient game. It feels like almost everything on the Valkyries is just kind of waiting for that late game teamfight stage.
Well, it has now become clear. Cullen over there in the solo for Ducky, and that means Tsukiyomi will be landing into Johnny's hands after all. We'll see how this matchup goes. It's worth noting that this Jingwei pick, while being a bit of a staple there for Imolito, is pretty good near the Sobek. A lot of the things Sobek does that are good, Jingwei just kind of chuckles at as she dashes back towards safety. So Imolito should have maybe a bit of an easier time, but that's a lot of what you're considering when you decide what support ends up working and why maybe Sobek has a bit more of that universality except against Jingwei. So Cord, you said maybe the Valk will end up playing this one a bit slower. Is that your read for the bolts, or are the bolts yet again going to be looking for pressure basically from the beginning of the game?
I mean, with Jake playing Sobek, I don't think he's going to slow down. I'm not sure they're going to be able to find as many early kills until he rotates to mid. I think he's going to have a lot better synergy with Venenu than he's going to have with Bara early on. Bara, late game, though, still going to be a menace. I feel like, especially with the Serket, like, this is built around the mid 3v3 start, so first 5 minutes, maybe it'll be a little more passive, but then it'll start to really ramp up when those rotations come through. You start seeing Lazara hang out in mid a little bit more. Same thing for Awesome Jake. Because Ganesh, like, we got to talk to Raffer about this last year at one point, but he's one of my favorite Guardians in the game. But you are not picking him for his levels 1, his levels 2, 3, 4. Really, it's 5 where he starts to feel good. Like, level 4, you can really adapt and at least start getting stuff done, but it's once those Dharmic Pillars come online that you have that full utilization. Your full kit's available to you. It's such a beautiful ult to be able to throw down. It should help out the Yanis, the Jingwei, Tsukiyomi to an extent, eventually Kukulkan. Like, the team fight that they have around that will be great. But Sobek, hey, he gets pluck level 1. He's good from the get-go. Like, he can load into the game stronger than what Ganesh is going to be playing at. I think Serket is going to be rivaling the Tsukiyomi, but I do like Tsukiyomi's scaling a little bit more, whereas Serket's early game, I think her control is a little bit more difficult to deal with. I think if the Bolts can get themselves off to a good start, win that mid 3v3 pretty heavily handed, which they have a draft to do, then they can at least stall the Valks out so long that maybe it doesn't matter if their comp, at least in my eyes, feels a little stronger in those late-game teamfights.
They might have a chance to turn those tables then, right? We'll see. Barracuda, Chernabog, Barabog, whichever one of those you want to go with, has become his new staple. He picked this over the Apollo this time around, Gormizer, and that's been kind of his signature pick. Both times I think he's chosen it over that Apollo. So this has become a sort of a new pick that Barra likes to go to when he has that chance. Allows him to impact all across the map, and he likes the pressure that it has in lane there too. I think this is a little bit scary if I'm the Valks. A lot of the pieces with the bolts are the same or functionally similar. Sure, Sobek and Serket, could be a deal different than the Nemesis and the Ymir they had last game, but there's still the Arthur, the Chernabog, and the Kukulkan that caused such problems for them back in Game 1. And that was even with sometimes Vin not able to sync up with the CC that was there for him. He still had a really, really good game. Imagine he's even a little bit more accurate with some of those, or the setups there for him. I think this game's going to be really, really tough for them. They're going to need an excellent performance out of Raffer and the kind of all-star performance that we know Johnny could do in the SCC if they're going to turn this one around.
And that's, again, I think to double back, right? Johnny had a good game last time around. Like, he still was like, what, 6-2, 7-2, or something ridiculous like that. Maybe it was 3 towards the end there. I can't remember the last KDA. But it was, like your Raffer was 0-5, 0-6. Jingwei was 1-5. Like, it was very difficult to lean on anybody in that game. Yanis had a ton of damage, but Zeros wasn't able to find a lot of kills. And after, again, those first few skirmishes, wasn't having as big an impact as he had initially. And the same thing for Ducky. I think getting Ducky onto something maybe a little more controlling. The King Arthur got to kind of run rampant, didn't worry about the 2 assassins, and Ducky, even when he was able to dive deep, didn't have much he could say about that and find kills in terms of it. So Kukulkan, I think, is going to be a good up trade for them. And I think if Johnny just plays the same way he did, or even better, then they're going to be able to find themselves in a much better spot. But I think there's more pressure here on the duo lane. The right half of the map, mid included, had the damage numbers and had at least the kill numbers to make themselves look good. The duo lane, Jingwei, towards the end of it, was able to stack up some of those numbers, and Melito was able to get something under his belt to say that he wasn't necessarily out of the game. But like you said, we constantly were watching him use his beads to get away, constantly watching him use his ult to escape, and there were a lot of really cool cinematic moments for it. But he didn't really get anything done because of it. And so if he's under the same amount of pressure, things are really bad. With Cullen on the table, though, that keeps King Arthur's hands a little more full, a little more difficult to just jump into the back line, cause so much trouble for Yanis and Jingwei, and they actually get to be a part of the game this time.
Yeah, and this dive of the Valkyries that you're kind of alluding to there, their ability to sit on top of this Kukulkan, I think is going to be really strong here in game number 2, right? The ability for Tsukiyomi to use that Piercing Moonlight to get right past the Sobek, to get right past this King Arthur, and Kukulkan just sort of a blink into that Spear of Mortal Pain, and then he transforms. Should be able to do pretty well, too. I think that in game 1, the Valks were hanging with them for about 15 minutes or so. In fact, they even won some big team fights. It's just that afterwards, they had to reset. The Bolts stole some Furies and were able to start building that lead up. It can even be a question of just, can the Valkyries consistently handle this mid game a little bit better, Gore? And then they make it into the late game where things are a little bit more even, their dive's a bit stronger. I mean, remember, in their last Phoenix defense on the left side, Zero's hit Venenu for like 1,000 damage with through space and time, and they couldn't even catch up to him quickly enough to kill him efficiently, right? They still lost that fight. If those numbers are a little bit more even, then maybe that game's a bit different too, and maybe they've got a bit of a better shot in the mid game of keeping things close.
And I can think of a few instances where that exact kind of scenario happened, right? Like Kukulkan was able to go through, Venenu was getting chased down, I want to say by Ducky, but Ducky wasn't able to find the killer, ends up getting killed because of the chase. And you know what? Vin's about one hit from death. He walks next to the wall, throws a tornado onto the other side, still gets damage out there for the Valkyries. Like, it just felt like so much of a control from him, even when he was the one getting zoned. And so if you can sit on this Kukulkan and make him feel worse, I think Tsukiyomi is going to be good at that. That's what Ducky was doing last time, was trying to chase him down. I think this time Johnny is going to maybe be a little more consistent with it, although his set was able to do it pretty early on. I want to see what Johnny's adaptation is going to be to deal with Venenu.
Well, a bit of a quick update. We had to make a remake that was a little while ago when it got started. We should be, though, getting into this game pretty shortly, though, so not too much longer of a delay for you all out there in chat that want to see the actual action start up. But don't worry, we should be getting there before too much longer. Gore, though, I find myself agreeing. Johnny should be able to maybe have a bit more of a consistent game here this time. He's on the Tsukiyomi. That gives his dive potential, a bit of a boost, makes it a bit easier for him. It is going to be hard for him to get out, though, so if on the back of all that there's a pluck, there's a King Arthur ult, then he might be just straight up rip. To me, this is really going to depend on how we exit those first 20 minutes of this game, right? If we're exiting on even standing, on even footing, then it could go to just about either one of these teams. But the Bolts have done a really good job recently of getting back to that early game pressure we knew them for as Renegades back in Season 7. If that happens again, it'll be just like Game 1, and the Valkyrie's going to have a hard time keeping up in the late.
Yeah, I think for this one, Valkyries, it's such a tall order and a tall ask, but Johnny, look, I'm giving him more things to focus on than I think any one man can in a single game, but I feel like early on this game, a gank over to duo is going to be very helpful. I think Sobek's going to be able to put out a lot of pressure versus the Jingwei Ganesh lane, and so a good gank over there, maybe to try and find a kill very quickly against the Bolts, and then start focusing up on mid and causing Venenu a lot of trouble. That's at least the path for the jungle that I can see being useful. It also, if that happens in that way, gives Ganesh a nice opening door to get some experience online, get some of those levels maybe under his belt to catch up and become the formidable opponent he can be after the first few minutes of the game. It gives a little more time to the Jingwei, but it also gets you into a position where Zeros gets not even solo farm. He just gets to have the pressure in his mid lane, has a lot of control over there, more than Yanis really deserves and needs, but he'll be able to control it. I think this one is so independent, or not independent, completely dependent on how Johnny can perform, and that even if, Yanis has a good game, if Jingwei, if Kukulkan, if all of these players end up having a very clean game, Johnny can be the reason that they go from just clean to excellent, right? And almost, not necessarily perfect, but something very near. But like you said, the Bolts, especially early on, and with the control that they have Haddix can make some really good rotations. Same thing for Serket. Once Sobek joins that 3v3, that mid game is going to be devastating for the Valkyries, and they could fall behind pretty heavily if things just slip up once.
Gotta make sure they're keeping their eyes on what Jake's plan is. The 408 was a thorn in their side in Game 1, and they cannot allow a repeat performance. Let's get ready, though, to head into the action. Valks and Bolt, a critical game number 2 as we get it down to Dolson and Myth.
Thank you, Finch and Gormizer, professionals as always. Not for a moment running short on things to talk about, and there are no shortages, I think. Myth one of drama going into game number 2. Doug's still working the camera for us. A run back in the mid lane. Kukulkan, Giannis. I think the most important pivot might end up being the fact that it's Jake on this Sobek now and Raffer over on the Ganesh.
Yeah, I think that Raffer in particular should have a much better performance here in Game 2. Very much easier to utilize those Dharmic Pillars, that silence. Going to have a pretty interesting interaction with Jake. If he does go for the pluck, could silence it out before it gets into a range. There's a lot of things that could go the way of the Valhalla Valkyries in this one, maybe able to even up the set, but you already highlighted it. Jake on the Sobek, can we really call that a downgrade, right? I mean, sure, Ymir may be his signature pick, but Sobek certainly just better insofar as the meta, so keep your eyes on him. I'm sure he's going to be trying to keep that same level of energy that we saw in Game 1.
This is a small micro game, but Barracuda and Jake both start on the purple buff. Emilito rotating over for what usually is just the final minion there, so we'll see if that ends up playing any difference in the early onset of this lane. Johnny over on the Tsukiyomi this time. Serket for Lasbra. Important to look at there as well. Jake will hit level 2. That's kind of why I'm wondering the ebbs and flows of this lane and where that starts to look. And once that pluck comes online, you have to imagine, Mifflin,
Toxic.
that throughout the first few levels here, this duo lane is probably going to be kind of frightening for Raffer and Emilito up against Jake, but once you hit that level 5 mark is when this Ganesh can really start to make a difference. It's already a pluck and then a dash out from Emilito. That's a bit of interaction you expect to see some this game. Emilito doesn't have to use the beads, can dash out of the pluck. So it's really maybe Raffer that needs to be worried.
It is.
Emilito
Emilito doesn't
again.
have the dash this time. Plucked in, rooted beads used. One more auto zone it's going to take. Yeah, 408 puts him down. That's why they were playing passive. Barracuda knew he had the advantage, but still gets a little bit BM with the repeated backs, picking up first blood for his team. Emilito, that's a rough and tumble start, man.
I don't know if I've ever had a worse caster's curse in my entire life. I mean, it's one thing if we're kind of talking back and forth, we spread out these opportunities, here's how something may not happen, oh, I'm really liking how this team is playing, and they lose a fight. In the same breath that I say Emilito maybe doesn't need to be all that worried if he's going to be able to dash out of all these, literally gets plucked and dies, so that's on me, I guess. Sorry, Emilito, you're my fault that you dropped down there for first blood, but now commanding presence here in this duo lane for Jake and Barracuda. Barracuda went off
nice.
in game number 1. There you go. Silence out on the pluck. You got to be quick. You got to be quick on that silence. And I imagine there's going to be a little bit of a game of chicken going on here, Mifflin, where Raffer's going to be looking. If you sense Jake is about to pluck in, maybe you channel the silence. Maybe Jake can bait out the silence. Little things like that in the first few levels of this game. Emilito plucked yet again and dashes out this time successfully. But the onslaught continues. A shell gets popped. Jake is low on mana, so something to be mindful of there. Purple buff back off of respawn. Lasbra Venani rotating over from mid. Johnny's going to get taunted back in. This is a 4 versus 4 if Zeros is able to rejoin the fight. This Bolts team, they want to fight. They want to fight now. Luckily, it's a portal out, and Johnny survives.
Man, this duo lane on the side of the Olympus Bolts is just absolutely manhandling the Valhalla Valkyries. They're able to rotate 2 over to the red buff, trying to see if maybe they can pick up the kill on the Johnny. It's just been an unrelenting aggression from the Order side team in the first 3 minutes here, and that's exactly what you'd expect to see off a Sobek pick. He's going to be looking for these plucks consistently. Now Johnny stepping into the Olympus Bolts side of the jungle, seeing if maybe they can strip away a red buff. No rotation from that aggressive duo lane. They're not interested unless it's in the enemy's side of the jungle then. Tries to defend it, couldn't quite do it this time around. The Valkyries at least able to find something.
See if Ducky can capitalize on some of this early pressure onto Haddix as well. Still halfway there on the blue buff respawn, so that's what we'll keep our eyes on for Johnny here over the next couple of minutes if there is an attempted blue buff invade. We know that Cucullin likes to do this. Likes to bully out his lane opponents early on. Ducky had a little bit of that in game number 1 with the Tsukiyomi up against the King Arthur Haddix as well. Kind of feels like you might be on the back foot for a couple of levels here, but look at this, Mifflin. Both junglers making their way over to solo. We could have a duo lane in the solo lane here in just a moment. Johnny has his ultimate. Lasbra does not. Haddix uses his ultimate to survive. And that's all she wrote. This one fizzles out with no kills.
Good trigger discipline from Johnny there, not using the piercing moonlight to try and finish off that kill. It does trade out his beads for that attempted gank, does the jungler of Valhalla Valkyries with Haddix. Superior usage of his own ultimate keeps him alive there. Lazarus still level 4, should be able to tick over to 5 here on this blue buff. If not there, at least the back camps, assuming they're able to get it. The Valkyries posture, see if maybe the Bolts take an aggressive pathing back in the lane. Not this time though.
Invade in onto the red buff, but Jake, you may have been cut out, my friend, and you have the Valkyries collapse, and Jake, all on his own, will fall on the Valhalla Valkyries side of the map. Red buff secured and kill as well, and the Valkyries are on the board.
Man, Jake, I don't know what the plan was there, bud. You had no backup. Can't be invading the buff on your own. Yeah, I guess that was the plan, just not quite well thought out. 3 people versus 1. Sobek, no ultimate available to him as he is still level 4. That fight almost never going to go his way. Valhalla Valkyries do put themselves on the board and slightly in the lead. Despite First Blood Bounty going the way of the Order side, Team Gold still leaning in favor of the Chaos.
And now we've got the Dharmic Pillars, Mifflin, for the Ganesh, and that's going to be a big difference maker here for Raffer. So many of the fights that swung game number 1 were in these small pivoty choke points out of the jungle, and Raffer just couldn't compete. There you go. There's the follow-up that we wanted to see from Venenu on some pressure early on. In game number 1, he does not. Venenu, I think on maybe the last tick of that ability, will get the kill from Raffer. Jake, though, rotates over, grabs the pluck over onto Johnny. Lazarus sidestepping some of the damage into the stealth. He goes piercing moonlight. Times out. Lasbra leaps on in. Portal dodged out by Zeros. It looks like one and done, but of course, Jake will hit another kill late on the beads from Zeros. I think that this time, to be honest, will survive, but it's a constant onslaught, it feels like now, from the Sobek.
Nobody wants to go gold in the sky, and that's exactly what Zeros does. He was late on the beads, maintains his life, but that first pluck from Jake onside of those right side mid camps was so impressive. Weaves past the minions, making sure he's able to find Johnny. Lazarus tries to wait out the piercing moonlight, get through that CC immunity so he can turn it around with a taunt, but doesn't quite have the damage to finish off that kill. Olympus Bolts do. They throughout that entire engagement finally pick up 1 kill and puts themselves back inside of the lead. Now Lazarus trying to defend his blue buff from a rotation from Raph for Ducky. Not willing to let this one go for free.
Blue buff dropped down by the Olympus Bolt. Another attempted red buff invade from Jake. This time he'll survive, but still won't get the buff over to himself. So Haddix back over, grabs his blue buff. Same start from the King Arthur, reinforced Greaves. See what he ends up doing with that first item, but here's where you're going to see the real damage of this Ganesh. If Haddix has to work out away from those Dharmic Pillars, he does, nearly getting the kill of the Valhalla Valkyries. Lasbra's in as well. Barracuda with the ultimate flies on over into solo lane, but has Lasbra overstayed? It's a double route through space and time, no good, and the knockback is in.
Jake?
But the portal only takes the Valkyries as far as awesome Jake. Jake does not have the lurking in the waters, Mifflin. That could be a big difference maker.
Then trying to find Ducky on the left-hand side, doesn't quite connect with the tornado, so Ducky should survive this scenario himself. Valhalla Valkyries, nice usage of Zero's ultimate there to get themselves out of that situation. But I gotta highlight Haddix, man. Had he been even a second late on those beads, 0.2 seconds late on those beads, he's gonna get pushed into the Dharmic Pillars, get his defense shredded, and likely lose his life off the push from the Kakulin.
Yep.
Fortunately though, man's got the fastest trigger finger in the West, survives off of superior usage of the relic.
And I like already what we're seeing from Raffer, more proactive on this Ganesh pick. The Dharmic Pillars, low enough cooldown, high enough utility, that even if early on in this game you're able to drop it down, just grab 1 kill, maybe find some pressure, it's going to feel pretty good. But in the meantime, Haddix is pulled just about a half level ahead of Ducky, so that's something to look at as well over there in the solo lane. Awesome Jake started to hit those plucks a little bit more consistently after a fantastic first blood. Bit of a blunder over there by the blue buff, but now Jake's starting to hit his stride here again. And Melito's going to dash away from Barracuda. Just wanted to see if there was maybe anything more in this 1v1. But what I did see that I did love was Venenu capitalizing on some of that setup in the mid lane, using the Spirit of the 9 Winds. Didn't result in a kill. Barracuda getting ganked out here. Awesome Jake trying to close that gap. This is going to be A 4-3 versus 3 we're looking at here. It's the Dharmic Pillars down. Johnny gets pushed back by Lasbra, piercing Moonlight on through. Venenu with the Spirit of the Nine Winds connects onto Rapper, and that's the first blood in this fight. The second will fall to Barracuda, and the bolts collapse and grab themselves too.
Barracuda was out of position initially in that fight and just challenges Amelito to an aim battle nonetheless, wins it cleanly, forces the defensive use of the ultimate there from the Jingwei, and just a tough situation through and through. The Valkyries going to need more from their ADC, and maybe more from their soul laner as Barracuda gets involved all the way over on the right-hand side. He's everywhere on the map.
Over here? Did he just ult over here out of nowhere?
Yes, sir.
Barracuda just impacting the entire map right now. You think he's caught out on the left-hand side, he'll ult on over to the right. Haddix is there to help out with the kill, and now Ducky falls for the first time this game. 1 level lead over in solo, 1 in jungle, 1 in support, dead even over in the Hunter role, and then mid lane even there as well. It's a greater Scorpion over to the Olympus Bolt. It just feels like, Myth, there are some signs of proactivity from this Valkyries team, but the response has been more swift from the Bolts.
The Valkyries are doing a much better job farming the map. That's the only explanation for being 1-5, but still just about dead even insofar as gold. 1,000 separating these two teams, closer to 900 in favor of the Order side. They should have a much more substantial lead at this point, but now that they cleared out the Greater Scorpion on both sides of the maps, the Bolts should be able to fall back easily off of a one fight and pick up something of value. Keep your eyes on this Gold Fury. I wouldn't be surprised if they started up very soon.
Lasbra's been active in the early game here as well. Zeros has to use the beads through the Porter Hill go. Lasbra holds on to his ultimate. So despite a 2-level deficit there out of the jungle, Lasbra's still able to half HP Zeros with 1 flurry of his abilities there. And it ticks up to level 10. So both junglers, probably the same level of activity early on in this game, but Lasbra's just been more effective at it. 3 assists compared to the 0 so far of Johnny. So the Tsukiyomi's going to need some time to wind up here. What's Haddix looking for? Maybe some small poke, a little bit of damage over onto Ducky, but Myth, I think we've reached the point now where it's going to require moving heaven and earth in order to get a gank off on one of these solo laners.
I'm looking at Johnny's build right now, and going for the Crusher in that first slot should help out a little bit with damage, but he's not going to be nearly as tanky as he would be had he gone for the more standard Shifter Shield start on Chile, getting delayed as well, so he's not got that cooldown reduction that Lasbra has, or the magic defense. Very interesting decision. Normally, if you do go down that maze tree, you'd expect it to be something like a Brawler's Beat Stick for that passive anti-heal, as well as the penetration, but instead, Johnny goes for the Crusher, maybe to help out with that attack speed a little bit. We'll be interested to see where he goes from here.
Fight in the mid lane, and Venenu gets Zeros. I don't think there was any avoiding that one for the Giannis. Unfortunate. The Bolts wanted him dead, and dead he is. Now the first death of the game over on the Zeros. Venenu starting to swing here as well. This Kukulkan 3-0 early on into this game. Different build path. We'll get to that in a moment. Gold Fury started up by the Olympus Bolts. Emilito lurking close by. Raffer there as well. You could drop a Dharmic Pillars down, just see what you can get. But the Olympus Bolts doing a good job of body blocking the elephant out of the pit. But now the eyes have been turned. Dharmic Pillars connect onto Venenu. That's full health. Now on Ven out of the mid lane. Ducky gets a kill onto Haddix over in the solo lane, but what happens over here? Barracuda on a killing spree snags one onto Raffer, and it looks like there was indeed a gank. Johnny and Ducky combine for one on the right, as as Raffer falls here on the left.
But that it still is a net 2-for-1 in favor of the Bolts off that pick on Zeros initially in the fight. That's actually Zero's first death this set. 0-1 is the Giannis for the entirety of the set so far. Olympus Bolts try and pick up the Gold Fury, but a little bit too much defense from the Valkyries are able to force them back there. But I can't imagine that the Bolts are disappointed with how that one pans out. I wouldn't be surprised if we see them go back to base, regroup, and just try yet again. Zeros absolutely knows it, trying to strip away those oracles and control vision before it happens.
Here's what happened over in the solo lane. Ducky looking for the engage here. Maybe there was, yeah. So Johnny around the backside with the piercing moonlight able to work in, get that assist. So I said moving heaven and earth. Maybe you had to move earth a little bit, maybe heaven. Probably not both there. And Haddix goes down. That's going to give Ducky some breathing room over there in the solo lane. Zero's half HP yet again. Wonder how that one happened. Probably just a little poking and prodding. Venenu, Myth maybe going for a bit of an earlier build here. Book of Thoth, remember, instead of the Sands of Time and then Sands of Time later on, this time going for that starter item immediately into the Soul Reaver.
Yeah, that is an interesting build from Ven. A little bit additional burst potential with that Soul Reaver passive, getting that penetration online a little bit more quickly as well. Maybe worried about the dive potential of the Valkyries, and I would be worried as well. Johnny 2 levels up on Lasbra as a fight erupts around this red buff. Nice dash in from Rapper and ultimate as well to lock down Jake.
Oh, but look at all of the damage from Venenu, just waiting for that Spirit of the Nine Winds, begging to execute one of these targets, but he might not
rip.
need it. He'll get the Zephyr damage as well. Johnny tossed to the side, and the Olympus Bolts find another pick. Gold Fury still standing. That may be the target.
Should be. Gold Fury goes down pretty easily here unless Ducky's able to make a heroic rotation in. Jingwei utilizing that passive to close the gap, but still not quite quick enough. Gold Fury gonna go ahead and fall. Olympus Bolt starting to run away with this one, but despite being 8-2, despite picking up Gold Fury for themselves, they're still only about 1,000 gold up. The Valhalla Valkyries are doing an admirable job of keeping this game close. They've stemmed the bleeding substantially across the map, despite not really winning out on many of these engagements.
That's right. They're losing the fights, but they're losing them like 1 kill to 0, right? It's not these big sweeping team fights that are all going the Bolt's way. The rest of the map they're being able to farm up somewhat successfully in the meantime as well. Ducky was able to get a kill onto Haddix a moment ago thanks to Johnny over there on the solo lane. So now Ducky's still that 1 level lead. This Kilcullen hasn't shown much in this game. Granted, the King Arthur hasn't much as well outside of some pressure there just now on the left-hand side of the map by the Fury. So Ducky on his rotation timing into some of these fights might be pivotal in keeping the Valkyries relevant in this game.
He could be. So far, he hasn't really been able to make a rotation over to the left side of the map. Instead, been largely relegated to holding his own over in the short lane. Jake tries to pluck zeros on that teleport in. Rapper slightly off the mark with the dash himself, so Jake can be able to walk out of that one. Not too worse for wear, only about 60% HP. That's a clean disengage from the Valhalla Valkyries, making sure that nothing goes awry there. Not much to fight over with Gold Fury being down, so the Olympus Bolts do not overcommit. Now, I would expect both teams again to reset back to neutral and wait for a pick, but Pyromancer being up means that they could potentially go for that. Amelito steps too far forward. Barracuda ults in.
Oh, maybe here's your pick, Miff, when airstrike up and over. Lasbra closing the gap. Beats used by Amelito. That'll get him underneath the tier 1 tower. Lasbra has to leap away. Lasbra gets the kill with the poison on the end of it. Barracuda grabs a crit onto zeros. Amelito did the best that he could there. What's happening on the left-hand side of the map? Spirit of the Nine Winds right through the King Arthur ultimate. The Haddix grabs the kill.
Now Jake not quite willing to let this fight end here, lurking the waters to find the slow. Ducky drops that CC immunity a little bit too early, gets plucked in, knock up from Haddix is set up for Ven. Not quite on the mark with a tornado, but should be able to pick up this kill. Just a little bit more CC is all it's gonna take. Ducky transforming, has the Salmon Leap available yet again. Should be able to work his way out of there. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the map, the Bolts are winning there as well. Tier 1 tower stripped away, blink! Force from Ducky, heads up play to keep his life, but still that defensive relic, or offensive relic rather, has been expended.
No, it's defensive in this use, but you want it to be offensive more often than not if you're Ducky. Felt like a death by 1,000 paper cuts there if Ducky was going to end up going down, but luckily able to survive. Now, mid laner for the Bolts, 403 is Venenu. This Kukul Khan hitting its stride. Barracuda, 305, the carries. That's where you want your kills. That's where you want the gold, and the Bolts got him on both. Pyromancer's going to go down as well. Now we're starting to see this gold gap widen, hovering right around that 1,000 mark for the most part of this game. Now reaches right around the 3,000 mark. Poor Amelito, Miff. I mean, if you really rewind, we saw some fighting that we finalized our play-by-play with there by the blue buff, but if you kind of fully go back, Lasbra and Barracuda dive onto Amelito, and Amelito played that about as best as you could. But that's just one of those instances where the Bolts decided Amelito's time to die was then, and it happened.
He was nearly able to turn it around with some nice crits coming through from the explosive Bolts Wind Demon combo. Unfortunately, though, the tower couldn't quite finish off the kill onto Lasbra. Clean dive over on the left-hand side puts the Olympus Bolts at 10-2 across the top. 3,000, as you already highlighted, now closer to 3.2 thousand gold in favor of the Order team, and Pyromancer fell down easily. Gold Fury spawning in the next minute means that that's where the next fight should likely start up. 18 minutes into the game, Valhalla Valkyries, if they want to put up a defense, we need to see them group up as 5. I don't think we've seen a true 5-on-5 engagement quite yet this game. Get Ducky involved, these fights might change.
That's right. Haven't seen that just yet. Ducky getting tanky enough with the way that his build is going here, that he'll be able to sustain up in some of these fights. You saw the onslaught he faced a minute ago. Ducky did and was able to survive. Haddix, though, going for the same build path that he did in Game 1. Bluestone, Reinforced, Void Shield, Stone of Gaia. This King Arthur is going to be very obnoxious, especially with some of the knockups that he's going to be facing on the other side to proc that Stone of Gaia healing. Then a Genji's guard now on the other side of things. So good luck. Valhalla Valkyries. You're going to need some unmitigated damage to start to work in there. Haddix rounded out his build with the Spectral Armor last time. You imagine that's the direction he's going to go. You know, it's kind of a pick your poison here thing, Mifflin. You want Ducky to get in these fights, but that tends to mean Haddix is going to be there as well, and this King Arthur has been near unstoppable.
Yeah, I think Haddix could benefit from the Spectral Armor, just not wanting to deal with the crits from Emilito yet again. It's been kind of the age-old counter pick into Jingwei that got really reliant on crits to find the burst to match the damage output of the majority of the other hunters within the Smite cast. Olympus Bolt set up the defensive positioning around the Oni Fury, and it looks like they're trying to burn it quickly. Frenzy already popped. Rapper going to be the first one forward.
Ducky is here. Darming as well. Where'd Venenu go? Oh my, the burst from Zeros gets this one started. A frenzy on the other side as Raffer re-engages into this fight. It's Haddix and Jake all alone on the backside, but now Lasper re-engages. Look at Barracuda free casting the damage on out, and he's got one. Looking for two, and he's up in the sky. Downhill crash onto Emilito, a double kill, one auto away, and Barracuda's got it.
Yeah, Barracuda cannot be allowed to free cast in these scenarios. Ducky forced to use the beads off a pluck. Nice body block from Haddix. Should buy some time for the rest of his team to get in there. Jake flicks forward, and up into Avalon goes Ducky, and down into Tartarus. He falls. Jake still keeping up the fight. Get out of there! It's an enemy tier 2 tower. He won't stop.
What a man Haddix is. Double kill under the tier 2 tower. 3-1-4 on the King Arthur. Oni Fury still stands by the end of it. The 1-2 punch of Jake and Haddix on one side, Barracuda free casting in the back of the fight on the other. This Bolts team is playing out of their minds today, Mifflin. It's an Oni Fury that goes down. It's a 5K gold lead. Zero's back in the fight, nearly dies on over to Lasper, who's having a good game at 107. It's going to be very difficult to deny this Bolts team a win here. The Valkyries have a chance, maybe around the FG.
Look, Dave, I don't know how much SCC you were able to catch towards the end of Season 7 there, but Haddix had a nickname down there, and you know what it was? It was Chaddix. He does not care about anything that's happening on the screen. He's always going to do whatever is best for him. This time around, it's sitting inside an enemy Tier 2 tower for 40 uncontested seconds, just absolutely tearing through the Valkyries, and now the Olympus Bolts looking to put the final nail in the coffin. Group it up around this Fire Giant, the most important neutral objective in the map. And it looks like Johnny might be the target. Steps forward a little bit, thinks better of it, regroups with his team. Had he gone any further in, could have lost his life.
And now it's this Olympus Bolts team game to kind of play with, you feel like. Setting up a line around this FG. Pyromancer's on the other side. Let's win a fight and then double back for the Fire Giant. All the rest of the fighting's been going well for us. Why do we care about starting up the FG if the Valhalla Valkyries are or not going to double back for it? Instead, it looks like the Bolts are going to maybe start to poke and prod at the Fire Giant now that Barracuda is here. Force the Valkyries into you, and then you get an easier fight that way. Barracuda and Haddix are both going to start up the fight on the back side. Raffer nearly gets deleted, but it's Barracuda this time who does. The carries are gone. The carries are gone. The Valkyries have found the best 2 picks they could have gotten at the start of this fight. Zeros does end up falling as well. And it's Johnny Haddix trying to chase down the scraps.
It almost feels like a binary question. Is Zero slamming through space and time? If yes, win the fight. If no, not this time. Now Johnny trying to turn into a little bit more. Goes forward. May have bought too much that he could. Looks like Rapper falls down to Laz, and Chaddix earns his title yet again. Tsukiyomi falls down. And clean fight from the Valkyries turns into an overextension. Easy win for the Bolts.
Hey, who am I kidding? I say Venenu and Barracuda are gone, but Haddix and Jake Lasbra still alive. Zeros falls, and Johnny will as well. So, no real chance for the Fire Giant right now, with Barracuda being dead for the next 5 or so seconds. Same can be said for Venenu, but still able to get some map pressure. Emilito did at least that on the left-hand side, pushed in the Tier 1 tower, moved the minion wave up to the Tier 2 tower as well. And so Mifflin, now you're at a point where you're the Valkyries, maybe more specifically you're Zeros, and you're thinking, I've done everything I could. Johnny there as well. We deleted Venenu and Barracuda the moment that fight started, and we still came out 1 kill behind. I'm not sure who you focus on or what you focus on at this point.
Gotta focus the same targets. Barracuda still the most important person to remove from the map. Maybe not with the performance hi-rez is having now. Zero's caught out, forced to use the beads. Spirit of the Nine wins. Would have hit had those beads been down. Unfortunately, they were not. So that's 2 ultimates expended on the side of the bolts, just to strip away 1 defensive relic from Zero's. But they do create a ton of space again around this fire giant. The Valkyries, I'm not sure that if I'm them, I'm stepping up to defend. That's 2 lost team fights in a row. I think might as well let it have it and roll your dice in a tier 2 soft defense or Phoenix hard defense.
Especially a fight that you thought that you had won right at the onset, but I think hi-rez had something else in mind there. Jake at 1-1-13, 14 affected kills for Jake on this Sobek. That's good for top on his team, top in the game as well. 14 out of 17 seems like a pretty good percentage. Over to me as well. The Stone of Binding doing some absolute work and setting up burst damage for the rest of his team on the back end of those engagements. The big ultimates that got spent, Myth, Lasbra, Venenu, starting to come back. Unfortunately, the beads a little bit slower on the respawn. What's Lasbra looking for here, though? He's in the snake pit just a little bit. If the rest of the Valkyries were able to turn around, spot him out, and double back for the kill, but they will not. Just getting these waves on, pushing in. Fury back and respawning soon. This one's a primal. Maybe that's important, giving the Bolts that extra boost of confidence and starting up the big objective here in a few minutes.
I can't believe they need the extra boost of confidence. They're 17-5, 25 minutes in. I'd be walking into the fire giant just confidently, freely, not worried about anything, but instead they are going to play it a little bit slower here. Primal Fury should make it easier to get that fire giant, and hi-rez knows he's not going to be needed on that Gold Fury push. Instead, keeps hovering around the fire giant, just trying to deter the Valkyries from stepping forward. If the Valkyries know, this could be an opportunity for them to look for a fight. Lazarus split pushing mid, Barracuda on the left-hand side, 5-man grouping from the Chaos team. 1 opening is all they're going to need, but if Barracuda has to, he still has that global, can get over there in a heartbeat.
That's right, Barracuda's picked those targets. Look, I mean, so much of what we talked about with this Chernobog is, yes, you have the ultimate, as Barracuda will solo out the Primal Fury. You have the same rotation ability of the Apollo, but you have kind of a less variety of choices in where you crash down. You always have to go near somebody on the enemy team, but Barracuda has just been so on point, picking and choosing his targets and his timing and where to drop down with that ultimate. Jake, though, a bit caught out here, half HP, but a Spirit of the Nine Winds flies through, and Emilito gets deleted. Here comes Barracuda as well. Zeros has to leave the fight. Lasbra likely going to go down. It's a double kill from hi-rez as Ducky will pull back 1 in this fight. Zeros free casting from over the wall, but the rest of his team is dead. What does it matter if there's nobody else to follow up? Olympus bolts. They'll find 3.
hi-rez inside of the entirety of the Valkyries for that entire engagement still somehow walks out at 60% HP, still healthy enough to tank the Fire Giant for his team. That's why I thought they'd be confident going for it. That Fire Giant only drew breath for 10 seconds after they pulled it. Not even burns down so quickly still. 3 dead on the side of the Valkyries, no defense potential here. Instead, Zero's allotting his time towards split push. Gonna see if maybe he can push up that left-hand side and make it harder for the Bolts to look for that end, but it's a double-edged sword. Phoenix exposed, Rapper's the only one there. I think the Bolts should be able to clean this one up pretty easily.
That's right, they're gonna walk into the mid lane here. Emilito 5 seconds away. Johnny, Ducky, both 10, so it's mid lane and then retreat now for the Olympus Bolts. 3.5 minutes on the Fire Giant power play. Tier 2 tower, half HP on the left side of the map. These tanky frontliners are just so healthy that you might not even need this minion wave, but I think crossing your T's, dotting your I's is important here for the Olympus Bolts. And look at what we're seeing yet again from Jake here. Look, there were a couple times in game number 1 where it looked like the Ymir was going to walk in, like kind of just feed, and then nothing happens on the end of it. But now in back-to-back games, Jake has walked in, burnt cooldowns from the enemy team, somehow survived, or if he dies, it's barely. And then the rest of the Bolts are able to jump in and clean up. It's like a bait and switch almost that Jake is playing. If he's getting engaged on, somehow he's choosing to do it in a way that's somewhat effective. Through space and time from Zeros, no good. It's a pluck off to the side onto Johnny. Could this be a game-ending fight? hi-rez unstoppable. If you needed me to tell you, you haven't been watching. He's on a 7-kill streak now on this King Arthur. Barracuda 7-1-8, 7-1-6 for Haddix. The top and hunter of this game are absolutely tearing through the Valkyries.
Haddix trying to stop that Jingwei back on the back end, maybe trying to buy the time for his team to work their way into the base. All he has to do is distract him. If Emilito doesn't go back, I think the Titan falls pretty easily.
Yeah.
Haddix doesn't even have to win the fight, and he's doing it anyway.
Yeah, he's going to win the fight anyway. Into the mid lane go the Olympus Bolts here. Eyes on the Titan, eyes on the wind. Spirit of the Nine Winds, half pelts the big one. It's a pluck from Jake that gets mitigated out by Zeros, and Barracuda and Venenu will finish this one off. It's a 22-6 win for the Olympus Bolts.
A convincing W for the Bolts here. Tons of fans at home got to be celebrating that one. I know Barracuda has got a lot of personal fans as well, and that was a fantastic performance from the ADC. And a great look for the new rookie in the SPL, Haddix, or Chaddix, as I think he deserves off of that performance. Looks incredibly strong, both matches, flexing his God pool as well.
Yeah, King Arthur, scary in the hands of Haddix. Kind of feels like their Mifflin. I think it was 7-1-8. Might have gone to 8-1-8.
Too many.
If he got that solo kill over onto Emilito there by the end of the game. The Olympus Bolts, they roll in this one back-to-back 30-minute wins for the win, or the Vahalla Valkyries. Quick break. We'll be right back. Stick around. Well, this one took a while for the golden experience to line up with the kills, Gormizer, but I think for the most part this game was never in a ton of doubt. The Bolts end up having a really good performance out of the front line all set long. Vin looked even better on Kokoka the second time around, as did Barra. I think Lazarus Arquette was a nightmare too. The whole squad played well here and found themselves a really impressive 2-0 win over a good Valkyries team, just playing in some tough conditions right now. Gordo, what was your read here on this one? Why did the Bolts look so dominant here in Game 2, despite maybe like a little small mix-up on that fire giant where they end up losing a couple people?
Yeah. We go back and look at pretty much... So all the stuff that we said the Valkyries needed to do going into this game didn't get done, and all the things we said the Bolts really needed to do and to control this one. They did do, right? Like, getting aggressive early on, forcing this Ganesh to feel awkward because you know he's not going to be able to do too much like early in the game compared to what Sobek is going to be able to do. You got Haddix just having a great game on this King Arthur Part 2 because he had that already in game number 1. It just feels so weird that the Bolts, or I should say that the Valkyries, again, draft for something so late game, and then they weren't able to get there. I feel like they let too much onto the side of the Bolts get kind of out of hand way too quickly. And admittedly, there's not much they could do about it. Johnny was the one that I put a lot of the pressure on for the Valkyries to have it work. And I feel like because Johnny and Ducky weren't really able to grow in that game, they weren't able to get anywhere and really become a unified piece of the puzzle for the Valkyries. It just made it so much easier for the Bolts to then start ripping them apart at the seams. And then, of course, it doesn't help when, like you said, Lasbra, Jake, like they do really well. Jake with 18 assists, so really, really solid. But Bear's 7-1-8, Haddix is 7-1-6, and when you look at the other side, Emilito combined, 2-9 across the 2 games, not even able to crest the 5-digit mark there in terms of damage. It just feels like this one starts in the duo, starts in the solo, and then kind of converges there in the middle.
Yeah, this has not been a good set for this Valkyries duo lane. And I think that's something where they're kind of on life support at this point, Gore. They're going to need some backup over there because they've been struggling. Raffer, I think, getting a bit more involved. He has always been a support that's going to have more deaths than most others. He's very willing to take those risky plays, whatever it takes to get the focus on him and not on his teammates. But it didn't bear out this time. He was just dying on his own for the most part this time around. So they got to make sure they're cleaning up that dual lane for sure. Not the only place where they had their struggles. Of course, that wouldn't be fair to say, but did look a bit glaring this time around.
It's one of those things when the more obvious issues are the ones at least to fix first, right? And then something else becomes the most obvious, and so on and so forth. If Emilito and Raffer polish things up, and honestly, I maybe put a little more pressure on Emilito. Raffer's doing pretty much the same as what we saw last year. And so if they can polish things up a little bit, I think they start looking better. Whereas for the Bolts, continue on this trajectory. Like, this is the team that we got to see do really well last week. This is the team that looked really good here. I want to continue seeing this. I think that first set against the Leviathans maybe not quite indicative of what we're going to get out of this team.
Yeah, just not great for him. I think that this is a team that's obviously going to improve with time, the Valkyries in particular. So still, the Dragons and Leviathans up at the top, but the Bolts now, the only other team besides the undefeated teams with a 2-win record to their name currently. So a good start to this one for them. The Valkyries going to have to keep looking to improve their own record. So they were able, to find a nice win over the Warriors earlier on in this week, but still think it's not looking great for them just yet. They'll be getting better before you know it, though, I'm certain. We got another great set coming up here next. The Leviathans and the Kings is going to be a monster set, man. And I think that's you and I getting a casted course. So very lucky, I think, for us to be able to do that one. But I'm super pumped for it. Can't wait to get onto that. Before we can move on to the next set, though, we're going to wrap up this last set. Haddix is the one standing by for the post-game interview.
Yeah, Haddix is with me after what was an incredible set, not only for you, but for the entire squad there. So first and foremost, congrats, Haddix, on the win here today over the Valhalla Valkyries. First off, I want to start with you. Look, it's been a great start for you. I think you guys are 2-1 now, as we just saw in the standings. Good start. Your first official stint in the SPL, had that run with Sanguine a couple of years ago. What's the transition been like for you? Obviously, the play is right up there with the SPL, but as far as practice, shot calling, things like that, how's it been working with the SPL guys?
I'd say it's not too different from me. It's not that big of a change,
sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's been pretty nice so far. I've been doing a lot of the shot calling, mainly me and Lass, but we've improved a lot from the first week for sure.
Yeah, you absolutely have. I am curious. Look, one of the highlights of game number 2 there was you and Jake working together underneath a tier 2 tower, just kind of running down a double kill. What's it like working with Jake? It seems like the both of you guys have pretty similar energy about you. You just want to run forward, engage at constant times. Do you see some similarities between your two play styles that work well together?
Well, me and Jake have always been, like, we played together back in, like, Compound.
Right.
It's been a long time. But, yeah, we definitely play very aggressive. But the funniest part about that is Bear was calling us back, like, the entire time. And Jake was like, are we going deep? I'm like, I'm going deep. He's like, okay, we're going deep. And you just can't let him live.
So somehow I knew that in the back of my head. I'm like, Bear's telling these guys to leave, and the two young guns are like, hell no, we're going further forward. For you, though, before I get to kind of the team, in general, to round things out here, what are your next things to work on as an individual? Look, you had a great game in the solo lane today, great teamwork, so I think it's hard to kind of nitpick how you played today, but as an individual, is there anything you're focused on and improving in your game?
I'm always trying to work on my comms probably the most, and my rotations. I think my rotations could have been a little bit better. I kind of had some ones that like didn't really lead to much, and I could have just been farming instead. But yeah, mainly rotations and comms.
Well, it's great for you here today, Haddix. Congrats again on the big 2-0 win over the Valkyries. I believe you guys are up against the Oni Warriors next time we see you, so good luck in that matchup. If I don't talk to you, everyone at home, stick around. Leviathan's Kings up next.